Nice.
We're live.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon,
fellow
gentlemen.
humans.
Thank you for joining us, episode 6 of Talk of All Trades. Today's guest is Matt Teel. Just recently got his master's degree from the University of Houston, Clear Lake in the area of physics. And we are pleased to have him here to have him, school us on some physics. What does one do with a master's degree in physics?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This is a really cool setup.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're gonna jump out of the gate with what can you do with
what
physics?
can you do with a master's degree in physics?
Well, it's a pretty broad discipline. I think that if I were to just sort of generalize, you can think of it as first principle approaches to a lot of maybe applicability, such as engineering, mechanical engineering, or any of the engineering disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, with that being said, you can think of engineering as applied physics.
Okay.
So a lot of the STEM specialties, I would think of as physics as a fundamental underlying first principle approach to any of that. So it's kind of like if you have a computer science background of any sort, like if you dive down to the assembly language or machine code, that is literally like having the transistors and the logic gates do what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
to then be compiled into the assembly language, then C, like you're basically going from a lower level on up in abstraction to C or something that's dynamic like Python. So like the physics would be sort of the machine code or like the lowest level underlying
Be like
principles of
theory?
how things work.
Like the
theory,
ones
I
and
guess.
zeros, basically. Like
Yeah, well, not so much in the sense of it literally being like that, although that's an interesting
Comparison.
because when you get to quantum mechanics, you're dealing with discrete symmetries. But no, like the sort of way that I'm thinking of that is just in the layers of abstraction.
Okay, got it.
Like you can essentially derive any of what you're using in engineering from first principles physics.
Okay.
So it trickles all the way down to this like fundamental layer
Mhm.
of reality as far as we know it,
Yeah.
because it's still, a lot of it's still a mystery to us. So.
Oh, sure.
an interesting segue. Me and Thomas actually met in physics.
Oh, we
class.
did. Yeah, but that
Nice.
was in high school.
Honors physics in high school.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't.
honors
master's physics. Oh, yeah,
No,
right?
no. Yeah, high school physics, of course.
Nice.
Miss Parlangeli.
Oh, man, that was her name.
Yeah, and her husband, Mr. Parlangeli, was the chemistry teacher.
That's right.
Yeah,
Match made in heaven.
match made in heaven. Yeah.
When you're first introduced to physics, like in high school, it's tough. I struggled with introduction to physics, and I was starting this whole thing.
I actually liked it. It was my favorite class. I think my fondness of physics grew from there. 'Cause
Okay.
I actually love physics as like a subject. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like out of all the
Oh, it's fascinating.
school subjects, chemistry was my worst. I fell asleep every single day. Probably because his voice was very nasally. He had like a really nasally voice. And I
Yeah.
just, for some reason, just could not take it, and I just fell asleep every day.
Yeah, that
But,
might be a deterrent to like your interest level.
yeah.
Yeah, your teacher.
Yeah.
Whatever
No, that's
they're
a huge. It really is, especially with something like math. I claim that the style of the instructor, especially with younger age groups,
Mhm.
turns away, and this is something that's generally known in the field, turns away a lot of what otherwise would be highly interested, motivated
Candidates.
students.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because of where that student was in their age group and their mental development, in conjunction with how it was delivered, the information, and it just is not optimal in a sense.
Sure.
And I don't know what can be done about that.
Yeah, I
but
don't know either.
it's an interesting kind of thought to have, because then there's cases later in life where they discovered they did like it, but they used to hate it,
Mhm.
or they weren't, or they thought they weren't good at it, but they only thought that because the instruction was not that it was bad. It's for them, because everybody's individualistic with the way they learn.
With the way they learn,
So
yeah.
it may
That's
not even
huge.
be the case that the teacher was bad.
Right.
It was just bad for that particular person's, the way that they consume information and put it
Yeah,
together.
the
but it was good for
combination.
other students, right?
Teacher-student combination.
I mean,
Exactly.
that is
kind of roll the dice, you know. So, I mean,
I don't know. We kind of got a little off topic, but that is kind of like the challenge with public school systems nowadays. Is because everyone they're starting to realize everyone is so individualistic with how they learn. Like they don't even fail kids anymore, really.
Yep.
You know, because they understand that, like you said, people consume information or process it
They
differently.
learn differently.
Yeah,
That's all.
right. So they don't want to scar them per se by holding them back,
Right.
you know, and all this other stuff.
Right.
But still, I guess if there is a deficiency somewhere, that has to be addressed, whatever. But when it comes to those specialized skills and things like what you said, yeah. But I guess that's the beauty of college. Just too bad it costs so darn much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you know, while kids are trying to figure out what they're doing, mom's dad's footing the bill, and they're like, "You better figure this out soon, kid,"
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, or vice versa. Or I mean, the opposite. You're working.
Yeah.
You're working and going to school.
Right.
So you're like, man, whatever I'm putting my hard-earned money to, I better be, you know, dedicated to it or whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I mean, again, you know, so you just got your master's in the area of physics, but up to that point, like it was a journey getting up to that point. So kind of like what we were just talking about before, it took you a while to get to there. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. Actually, it's one of my favorite stories to tell. So, I mean, the reason that I know you and you are music.
Right.
Yeah.
We go back. I think Thomas and I have known each other longer than you and I have.
Right.
In the San Jack days.
The San Jack days.
And we had piano together. I think we had fundamentals, a couple of classes, and that was when I first heard your band too. He was showing me one of your earlier
Cringe.
releases. No, I didn't. I thought it was pretty good actually.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And so, the point of that being that I had interests lying in music and music production.
Right.
So, you know, around 1920, I started putting together a small recording studio. No clue what I was doing. You know, just kind of trial and error. Like, we didn't have YouTube back then either,
Right.
so I'm kind of giving my age away a little bit.
Yeah.
And books, Gear Space, excuse me. They recently changed the name of it.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, to Gear
Good for,
Space.
good for them.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was like my where I consumed knowledge or secondhand knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think I started seeing Jack at 21 or so. We have a mutual acquaintance, Brandon De La Garza.
Brandon, yeah.
I think you guys did some recording.
First ever recording.
Yeah, it was with
Really?
him.
With
Yeah.
him.
He's an awesome
In
engineer.
in his garage.
Okay.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, that was our first actual recording we
That
did.
was fun.
That was fun.
That was a good time in
Yeah,
our lives.
Yeah.
So what was I going to say about that? That's right. He was the one who introduced me to the audio program at San Jack.
Okay.
I had met him through another acquaintance, and essentially, I was about a year and a half into my home studio and completely lost. So he was giving me some of the first pointers that I ever had as well.
Yeah.
And he told me that he was finishing up the audio program. I was like, that might be a good idea to like. I feel serious about this to supplement like what I'm doing and really get some, you know, a roadmap that is cohesive. Cause I'm kind of just pulling stuff from wherever right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's also good things with learning that way as well.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
Well, this is pre-YouTube again, right?
Yeah,
You could just go to YouTube and figure it out.
knocking on the neighbor's door. Hey, do you know how I can, you know, get the microphone? No, wherever I can get the information, right? So yeah, he was one of the first ones who had kind of ushered me in, or gave me some tips on that. And so back on track, I tangent a lot. I hope that's okay.
That's
No,
fine.
no,
right.
please.
That took me down a road of just exploring audio engineering. Like,
Okay.
the technical side of it. I did not start out as a musician. That was something I don't claim to be a musician. I mean, I've taught myself some instruments and get around just like for my own enjoyment. Like, oh, it's cool to play these songs, but you know, nothing like up on the level of a professional musician. So I was rooted in the technological side of it mostly, which made it difficult because it's usually easier. Usually it's the other way around. You're a musician,
Right.
then you want to learn how to record yourself or your friends. And so you're like, oh, I'm going to get a setup and you learn through that. It was similar, except I was learning through friends and, you know, I was recording the friends part, but my motivation didn't come from like, oh, I'm going to record my own guitar and I'm tired paying for studio time or whatever.
Right.
I'm going to go, you know, learn how to do it myself. So I slowly picked up instruments along the way, but that's besides the point. Where I became fascinated, to fast forward quite a bit, it was around the time I had began becoming interested in how the gear worked, like on the electronics level, like as far as the circuit design.
Right.
So I'm slowly gravitating away from music and more so towards how is this gear working, and how is it getting into the computer? How does the EQ work? And so I started becoming interested in that with DIY projects. And the first unit I built, I believe, was a Pultec some years ago. And so the question that actually segued me into physics was, I wanted to know how the signal went from the microphone down the cable into the AD converter. It hits the AD converter, and right there, my mind goes, okay, I've lost all cabin pressure.
Magic takes place.
I mean, I kind of understand the diaphragm and the SPL and, the mechanical vibrations, being transduced into electromagnetic, signals being carried down the wires, that representation. Then it hits the converters, and then it's like, I don't know what's happening there.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. It's coming back out of the speakers, but it's now in the computer being represented in a different way, but sounding virtually the same.
Right, yeah. So for people who don't know, AD converter stands for analog to digital converter. So you're taking the analog signal from this microphone like we are now,
Right.
and converting it into a digital signal,
Yep.
which the computer is then translating out into different media, essentially.
Out into the great yonder.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it was that
It's
it was
it's
that
magic.
desire to want to know how that
Yeah.
specifically worked,
Yeah.
led you into physics.
So, yes, precisely. There may have been a few points of axis, but that was one of the main ones. And that caused me to go look up Wikipedia, whatever, Google, what was happening there.
Mhm.
That brought me to a branch of mathematics called the Fourier transform, the Laplace transforms. These are all different mathematical transforms that basically deal with periodic systems, like wave mechanics. Like sound is a wave, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
So this is like a mathematical, I'm not going to say representation in full, but just in general here, it's a way to deal with oscillating systems mathematically and represent them. And that was my first introduction to a branch of math that looked completely foreign to me.
Mhm.
And I didn't start going into higher level mathematics until much later. So my background in math at that time was pretty elementary. It was, no calculus. It was algebra, geometry, things you would just normally take. Most of us take in high school. I know some of us take calculus in high school.
Right.
I did not. And so a lot of that was just sort of just an empty canvas of wonder. Just like, I have no clue. And that math looks fascinating. I have absolutely no idea where to start with it. And it just was in the back of my mind, and I just continued thinking about it, reading stuff on it. That's one thing I did, or wasn't afraid to do, was read things that were way over my head. And I still do that. And, I wasn't sure at the time, because it's not like connecting at the time, but there is an actual long-term benefit to doing that
Mhm.
if you keep doing it,
Is it that you get smarter?
I wouldn't say that. That's an interesting topic. It's more so that the way I look at it is that I am providing my mind with broken pieces of knowledge, and they feel disorganized, and I don't quite know what's happening yet, but they're being put there, and there's sort of a placeholder, not quite, but they're sort of being put there until at a later date there may be an event that occurs, or finally it gets glued together in some way. And then if you do that long enough, you notice that the concepts that these pieces are then modularizing, if you will then begin connecting on bigger levels. So essentially you're just creating this network of knowledge that is now becoming more connected and having associations with each other. Suddenly the concepts are becoming clearer. It's probably not the most optimal way to go about learning, but if you do that in conjunction with, say, a curriculum or a degree, or these days you can find all of this stuff on YouTube, which is a beautiful thing.
It's amazing.
It is absolutely amazing.
Well, they do that in academia. They start out maybe in like first year of any subject, just giving you some facts, maybe not giving you all the
Right.
details, just planting the seeds. Then as you go into the higher levels, they just start connecting all the dots just on a more intricate level.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
true.
it's-
Yeah. So maybe my approach was just a bit more disorganized than how somebody experienced in the field would organize it for me. But yeah, no, that's exactly.
It's more grassroots, more self-driven.
Hey, that's how he learns. So we kind of talked about that earlier.
Right.
You know, everybody learns differently.
Jumping in the fire head first.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that then. Oh, and there's another ingredient here. You know, as a kid, I was fascinated with astronomy and the stars. Funny story, actually, I had a stepfather at the time. His name is Bruce. He's a great guy. He had a transit. He did field work. Do you guys know what a transit is?
No.
Okay, so have you seen land surveyors? I
Oh,
believe it's one of the places they're used where they're sighting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like, it was something along the lines of that, except it magnified. It almost was like binoculars, for lack of a better example. It magnified whatever was in front of you. So I would use that as sort of my quasi telescope, or to look at the mountains or something. And so we would always try to focus that in on the moon. You would actually see it with better detail, and it was a pretty interesting way. It was kind of like my poor man's telescope, you know.
Right on.
Growing up. So, you know, I'd always been interested in that stuff, and I also grew up in Northern California, like far Northern California, in Redding. What was that?
Not a lot of light pollution. You can see a lot of stars.
Exactly. Up in the mountains. Yeah. Small town up in the mountains.
God, that's
and
beautiful.
It is just absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah.
And so I grew up like with that exposure, seeing, you know, the night sky like that. And I had, those seeds were kind of planted early, so that mixed in later with how I was approaching like what I just described in the studio, with, you know, being curious about how all this stuff worked. And I think they just sort of came to a point to where I went, I am going all in. This is something I know that I want to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping in head first and giving it my all.
Yeah. Earlier you said you kind of went into like an intellectual, like recluse, like self.
Yeah, I was being intellectual hibernation.
Hibernation.
I went into an 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that when you delved, you know, feet first into this? When you went into your, you know?
Yeah, that was about 29. It was like 9 years ago. About.
Okay.
Yeah. That was so. I was working. Let's see, what was I doing at that time? I think I was working at a machine shop, and that's some. If you've ever done CNC work, it's actually really amazing skill set to have. Yeah, it really
I've never done it. I got a good friend of mine who does. Austin
Yeah.
Hewitt used to do CNC work, and
Shout out to Austin.
shout out to Austin. We should have him on here at a later date. He's an interesting fellow too.
Cool, for sure.
But yes, he's at least talked about CNC work, and then videoed it some, and it's so awesome to see the machines work.
It's a skill set that I don't think is going away.
Yeah. So you were working there?
I was doing that, and I knew that I wanted to go back to school, and I just didn't quite know what for. It was a period where I was doing, on another level, a lot of searching and kind of piecing together like my future trajectory in a lot of ways. I had known that I wanted to, it was probably going to be electrical engineering. That's based on what I'd been curious about in the studio.
Right.
That would just make sense.
Right.
Electrical engineering, right? Or computer science, or rather computer engineering. So I then went, wait, I think it would be much more interesting to just do pure physics. I'm not going to have the specialty and the concentration of what an EE would have if they approach that degree, but my justification was I would love studying physics just from a natural phenomenon standpoint, and then still I'm going to build a lot of the first principles and fundamentals that are underpinning electrical engineering anyways, and all of the other branches. Not an expert in the field, but you have a conceptual sort of understanding of its connectivity to those fields.
Certainly.
And so that's how I sort of converged on physics, was going through that. Also my childhood and just, you know, cosmology and astronomy, you know, just all of those things. That made the most sense.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to probably be very difficult. And I had to I started in remedial math at San Jac. I went back I could at that time, admittingly, this is going to be painful to admit. I could barely. It had been so long, but I could like barely factor a polynomial at that point. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh no, I'm right there with you. When I went back to San Jack,
Yeah.
it was San Jack. I had to get a tutor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was in the tutoring room quite a bit.
I think we might know the same person. I think his name, Steve Jones.
Yeah, Steve's awesome.
Yeah, Steve. God, he helped me so much.
He did. He helped me a lot. Matter of fact, I actually started requesting him.
Yeah.
When I went in there. Yeah, he was very intuitive. I've even told him this. I've actually talked to him recently on Messenger.
Nice. I'm gonna tag him real quick.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I told him that. He said, "Hey, man, early on, I was struggling quite a bit. Like, you helped me really glue a lot of these concepts together. You know, like, I really appreciate that. Like, it's like all the tutors are great, but to find the one like we were talking about with sort of the learning and teaching styles, you know, sometimes being a conflict. The same thing is when you're looking for a tutor. It's the exact same thing. So, you know, go through, try them all out. They all have their strengths, but then you find someone who just sort of resonates with how you need to digest the information. And that was Steve for me. And there was a couple others too, but yeah, he was the one that I was definitely gravitating towards, and he knew his shit. Like he was, you know, on the whiteboard, you know, like especially with the physics and the kinematics and stuff, you know, just like going through the problems like it was nothing. Yeah. Cool.
So you started back at San Jack, remedial math. You're taking the tutoring, and then built up from there. Or?
Yeah. So the remedial math got a hold of algebra again. You know, then from there it's pre-calculus, and you learn the trigonometry, and that's another point right there for me.
Okay.
Was trigonometry, and that one, now that I think about it, was what actually sealed the deal in a pretty big sense. So being in music, I'll try to elaborate on that. Being in music, you know, you kind of, to a certain extent, have an intuition for like waves, especially if you're in audio engineering, like wave mechanics, like acoustics, phase especially. So phase is a concept that is very important in especially mixing, or microphone placement and coherency and all of that, but just the concept of phase. And, you know, having approached engineering for a while, or audio engineering, and being familiar with that field, I had already been familiar with those concepts of basic wave mechanics and phase. And I'm going to tangent just a little bit. You took Audio 1 with Les Williams, right? Okay, so that was another very strong conceptual point for me. The way he teaches Audio 1 is incredible, and a lot of those concepts are reinforced as well. So like that was another point of just intuitional reinforcement of just thinking about wave mechanics. Right. So where that comes into play here is in trigonometry, you learn the unit circle, right? And the unit circle is, you know, essentially you have the phase around, you know, the 2 pi. You have so
the degrees and
exactly, yeah, 2 pi, or you have the radians or degrees. You know, it's the e to the I 2 pi or e to the I theta. Like, that's how you're mathematically rotating around that thing. And then once I started learning its association with like a sine wave, then like sometimes you can conceptually do this. You take that sine wave, let's say you take the top peak and you move it over 90 degrees over the valley, you now have a circle, you now have the unit circle. So it's like, okay, yeah, you have 0, pi over 2, you know, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, so on. It's like that is one revolution around the unit circle. Then that gets associated with something called the harmonic oscillator, which underpins, by the way, everything in physics. And this is interesting. I'm going to come off this tangent in a second. You guys might have to keep track of my tangents.
Right. We have a tangent tracker right here.
Yeah, nice. That might be a good app idea. Maybe we'll get back to that.
Tangent tracker.
That gets linked with the pendulum, you know, when you're doing like a mechanics class or something. Okay. So the point being here is that this simple concept, fairly simple concept of the unit circle and phase and you know, the imaginary, what they call it, it's not really imaginary, the imaginary part of, you have the reals and the imaginary of that, the behavior of that system is connected to all of this natural phenomena and underlies almost literally everything on fundamental levels. and having it tied to not only everything that I was interested in, but also things that I prospectively would be interested in, and just it basically was a turning point for almost like it added a new wrinkle to my brain or something.
Yeah.
Like it was
Yeah,
like because
that profound.
it was yes, it was. And when I saw that, I went, it's an amazing feeling to have these concepts sort of glued together. I want to keep painting that picture.
Right.
You talking about string theory at all, by chance?
We can.
No.
I have opinions on it, and I have, if you would like, I can give you. So I'm not an expert in string theory, by no means, but I know enough about its background and where it's at in the community, and why certain camps don't like it, why certain camps do. It's not really whether you like it or not. That's in context of looking for theories of everything and grand unification and so on, which if you'd like, we can talk about that as well. But it's more so a really good tool. It's mathematically very elegant, very beautiful. However, it's quasi important, but it is more so a tool that has lended some deep insights, but it is not the answer. Essentially is how I'd boil that down.
Okay. It's just a theory.
Some people will scream at me for saying that, but well, just a theory is to say that is an interesting. There's a broad spectrum of how would you say it? Yeah, all of this is just a theory.
Yeah,
like
most of it's just
drill
theory.
down. Yeah,
Everything's really a theory, so we really don't know what the hell's going on.
exactly.
Not really. We
Um,
have laws, but they're just probably not as concrete as we probably think they are.
Well, I mean, that's why you call it a law, right?
I mean, in theory.
Oh, God. No, I like how you did that there.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
nice.
No, but
Yeah.
we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. I just thought that's maybe what you were referring
Oh,
to.
I would love
when,
to,
When you
but-
said that there was a fundamental connection
Right.
with everything, on a
Yeah.
Well, he was saying
Sonic
for
level.
him. He was saying for himself,
Mm.
like
Right.
when studying trig and learning about what'd you call it, the unit circle? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's the unit circle. That's
okay.
correct.
Okay. Yeah. Like that was kind of like an aha moment for you.
Yes.
I think.
Perfect. That's,
You know,
yeah.
and I guess pieced everything together. If nothing else, it sounds like it just painted a picture for you that you were on the right path. Like, yes, this is where you need.
Yeah.
And that may have been a confirmation that you're studying what you need to be studying.
Yeah, no, that's well said. That to sort of give another layer to this, it tied to my interest in music, and it tied to like my endeavors in math and physics, and really wanting to build that out. It basically became a point of, like curiosity to explore that seemingly would be endless. You know, like one way I can kind of put it is studying this stuff has also created like a boredom proof, like I'm never going to be bored. Like this stuff, I'm never going to know all, like there's no way you will even come close to even knowing what's available,
Yeah.
let alone
imagine.
what's not, what's on the other side of our perceptual
Right.
boundaries, but
Right.
yeah, so there was just a lot of pieces that came together in that way. Yeah, so that was another one of the key points. And from there, calculus, going through the calculus sequence, and then just that sets the tone for beginning physics courses such as mechanics or electromagnetism. You can't do any of that without calculus.
Without any of that
Yeah, there's
mathematics
just-
fundamentals, I guess.
exactly.
Yeah.
You can conceptually get an understanding, but to really get a grip on that stuff, you have to go to the math.
Yeah.
There's really no other way. I'm not going to say no other way to understand it from a conceptual standpoint, but if you want to dig in and really not only understand why it works in certain limits in the way that we understand it now, but also where it breaks down, where we don't understand certain things, why opinions vary. This is going to a certain extent in the theoretical landscape, but you start to see that no one really actually knows what's going on, but we have a really solid representation of how it works in its applicability, and also to start to formulate representation theories that for now give a really good approximation of what might be going on, and it works, and it matches experiment as well.
Right.
Particularly the standard model. That is something that is called, that's an effective theory, and it is incomplete by many measures. But it's it's for now the most accurate description of reality that we have, and it's kind of a centerpiece for that represents not only the last, modern physics speaking, 130, 120 something years, but just the entire sphere of aggregate knowledge, is sort of tied up in this standard model in a lot of ways. However, it's incomplete, and there's a lot of room for exploration, and most of that is happening at CERN, at the LHC,
Right.
with the experimental endeavors mostly, but both theory and experiment.
Yeah, because it's pretty much repeatable on our levels, but on the micro and the macro, I think is probably where it's kind of lacking all the theoretical.
Are you meaning sort of like the merging of the micro and the macro?
Well, no, just like on both ends of the spectrum, I think. Yeah, merging them, I guess, would be one way to look at
Okay.
it.
Yeah. No. I think I understand where you're coming from.
Just on a practical level, that we understand how stuff on our level
Practical level, absolutely, yes. So
works. Just
the reason I was struggling was not with how you were defining. I was struggling with for one, how am I defining what is practical in that space, and then differentiating. For example, if I were to describe, like, okay, here's maybe how we would segment the micro and macro in terms of how the standard model is thought about, and then try to define practicality within that. I kind of paused because that boundary was kind of blurred. I wasn't quite sure where it was. But yeah, that I'm not sure if you guys want to keep going with that or talk about something else, because I think I was talking about the trajectory through math, right? I was just making sure I wasn't like too far
I think we're on your
Just your
story.
journey.
Your
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
I think we're in.
Well, maybe I'm
somewhere-
checking myself then.
No.
Checkpoint.
You're right.
crawl
Where you
back out of
need
the
to
rabbit
be.
hole for a second.
Yeah,
Poke our
no.
head back out.
Yeah.
You're where you need to be as far as the story goes. I mean, from where I'm following, again, took the math to get the fundamentals down, so that you finally could delve into these I guess concepts of physics, or the I don't even know what would you call intro to physics, or whatever the case is. The stuff that gets more specified of what you studied.
Yeah.
You had to get this stuff down first.
Exactly.
And then you moved on to that.
It's like your tool. I think this might be a good way of thinking about it. I had to kind of build up my toolbox.
Yeah.
And then the math is, this is actually still kind of debated whether math is discovered or invented, and it's both. I believe, and I can elaborate on that in a second if you'd like. But
Sure.
to that end, I think that the math is kind of a language, but they are tools to help describe the world that we live in and how it works.
Right.
However, the symmetry is a word that comes up a lot in physics, and there's a really, really interesting and good reason for that. It's like you're discovering these relationships in our world amongst things. Like you drop something, and it takes a certain amount of time to hit the ground depending on the height, right?
Right.
So like there's a relationship, and there are things that are governing the behavior of what just happened. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. If I keep doing it, does it do the same thing every single time? Just really basic things like that. Like we intuitively know that we adapted here. So it's like, yeah, like it's probably gonna do the same thing every time,
Right.
But to actually like drill in and ask deeper questions, like what is happening there on a more fundamental level? The old story with Newton with the apple falling on his head.
Sure.
Kind of. I think the story went a little differently. Can't recall the details, but that essentially was what I think got him thinking more about what is happening there. The moon. What was it? I believe that it was his realization that the Earth's gravity was influencing the moon, and it was pulling it towards it. And there was a dynamic between the two, and that's what was causing the moon to circle around the Earth, orbit around the Earth, essentially. And Newton in the 1600s formulated calculus. Well, history goes he co-formulated it with Leibniz, and I don't think there's a debate about that. Maybe in the mathematical community, somebody can correct me. But Newton's notation mostly and his approach to calculus, they both converge in the same results and concept and how it worked. But Newton's was sort of it's the one we use today.
Right.
Is Newton's calculus. But yeah, a lot of that was him sort of thinking about the fundamental relationships and how to represent that with mathematical operations that would be repeatable and describe the event, and a lot of his calculus, amongst many other things that I'm missing, were developed through his quest in something of that sort.
Right.
And yeah, so let's see. You can put me back on track if you'd like. I can keep going, but
I mean, it sounds like it is thinking, like within thinking about those, or trying to analyze those questions or those observations within thinking about it, discovering the mathematics behind it, so you can solidify. I mean, that's what helped, and then you apply it. That's what advances us in our technology. Is it not? I mean,
yeah.
It went from noticing the apple fall to, I don't know, they developed the trebuchet or whatever the heck that thing is that flings, the
diseased animals over
like
there.
a catapult,
catapult or
yeah,
whatever. You know what I mean? It goes
yeah,
from
wall, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's all physics involved.
Of
So I'm
course.
sure they
Oh
had
yeah,
some
you calculate that in
scientist back there and figuring it out and like, hey man, you know what? If we design this thing, we can defeat these people.
Now we're calculating how to use drones to hit targets across the world and stuff like
or
that.
the atomic weapon. I mean, I'm
Or
not.
that too, yeah.
And it's so funny too because
Nuclear
like I said,
physics.
this is like some serious math going on, some serious, I guess, theories and everything else. But what do we use it for? For very basic stuff of how do I kill this person? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
True. Or how do we get to the moon, or how do we get to Mars?
Or well, let's try to do something more I guess productive, right?
Right.
Rather than just destroy, but
Right.
yeah.
just goes to show what knowledge can do, right? And then what hands, and then what,
Minds.
That-
Yeah.
Sure.
That is scary, actually. It's
Yeah.
good and bad.
Yeah.
But what you said is actually exactly right with the catapult example. And
Mhm.
they were hiring mathematicians to figure out the trajectory. You calculated that in high school physics with
Right.
the kinematics, with the projectile motion. That's exactly what they were calculating
Yeah.
to figure out whether it's going to make it over the wall, as you said, I think. And they would literally hire mathematicians to
Figure this out.
figure this out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
How tight you got to pull that rope?
Or anything.
yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not the technology, that is bad. It's like, whose hands is it in? And,
Sure.
the technology in its own pure sense, if you will, is amazing and beautiful, and it can do amazing things, but it sometimes is leveraged for things that aren't so amazing.
Right.
Which, yeah, that's I don't know if that's a human feat that we will solve, or if it's solvable, or if that's an interesting, sort of philosophical,
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
place. But
Yeah. I don't know if physics could ever formulate it out.
right, yeah, that the human
Our
condition,
morality, yeah.
yeah, morality, yeah, those topics. Yeah, so back to the math invented or discovered. I think that it is both. You're discovering relationships amongst our observable world, and now the directly unobservable world by other means, and then you are sort of using them to describe the natural phenomena.
Mhm.
So you are discovering relationships to formulate the mathematical frameworks to then give repeatable results that match an experiment you would do. And this is sort of, the theoretical endeavor and the experimental endeavor. The two are very closely linked, because when you have an experiment that is done, then you have a result, but you don't know how to formulate it mathematically, or what that would look like behaviorally, in detail anyways. you have the result, the information, the behavior of the system in general. But then you can have mathematical relationships that you discover that you're not sure what they describe, but they exist. These are symmetries, or these are things that exist that have certain relationships and axioms and rules and laws, if you will. Please forgive me, mathematicians, for butchering some of your terminology. But that is sort of another feat. And one good example of that is string theory. So string theory is not directly testable. So that's another thing, is there's no experiment you can do to verify string theory. And however, its mathematical relationships and its symmetry is beautiful, and it actually describes a lot of physics. And one of the main things it's supposed to accomplish is unify gravity with the other three, quantum mechanics, like the other three fundamental forces. That's a long story that is still going. Gravity is actually, there's no quantum field theory for it. I can elaborate on that if you'd like. But essentially, gravity has no quantum field theory associated with it, or quantum description. You get what's called singularities or infinities, and the equations break down. You have Einstein's field equations that are the descriptor for general relativity, which is like gravity on the macro scale, essentially. And you get gravity. So just broadly speaking here, you let's see what's a good way of saying this. I think a simple way of saying it is that the singularities are can be remedied in the framework of string theory. However, it's not testable. So I may have that a little backwards, but in general, that's about the problem. It's having to do with the equations breaking down, and then you're no longer able to provide solutions. And what this does is it doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong, but it tells you that you've gone wrong somewhere and that you need to approach it from a different. You either don't know well enough what you think is reality, or you need to approach it from a sort of different angle or a different way to then get these two to work together. And that is if there is a grand unified theory that does exist. And what that means is having all of the four fundamental forces. So you have gravity, then you have electromagnetism, then you have the weak force, which basically governs radioactive decay. So you have things that are radioactive or that decay. This is governed by the weak force. And then you have the strong nuclear force. The strong nuclear force is what binds the nuclei together on the level of protons on the level of quarks and gluons, which are the constituents of neutrons and protons, which make up, along with electrons, all of the matter that we know and beyond, right? So that the strong nuclear force is where I focus most of my energy on in my studies. But those are the four fundamental forces of nature. The four known and also operable to us fundamental forces of nature. And the three that are non-gravity, so the strong force, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism, are very well described in the standard model. Gravity does not fit. Gravity is not in the standard model.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's also, so here's another thing about gravity. I think its strength is somewhere on the order of 10 to the minus 42. That's really, really, really small. So here's a really great example of demonstrating that. Is you have the magnetic force. Like, say you have a magnet on the refrigerator, and you also have gravity acting down on it as well, right?
Yes.
Right. So it is clear that the magnetic force
overpowers gravity
by a long shot. And here's actually a better one: is that we are bound to Earth by its gravitational pull, right?
Sure.
So, or if you drop a pencil, anything is, everything here is bound to Earth by its gravitational influence.
Right.
You pick up a pencil. The neat way to think about it is you're literally picking up a pencil against the force of the entire Earth's gravitational pull. That's how weak. That's a good demonstration of how weak gravity is.
I get you.
So,
well, maybe because gravity, is only relevant to us on Earth, right? Once we leave Earth, is gravity relevant anymore?
So, relevant's a good word for that. If you were to leave Earth and be in the vacuum of space, away from any influential bodies that would create the gravitational pull, because what is on a macro scale causing the gravitational force that we feel, it is all a function of the mass and the radius of the object. So like if you have two objects, if you have a planet and a moon, or the Earth and the sun, just anything that dynamically influences each other.
Right.
they each have a mass and a radius that are different.
Yeah.
So Newton's gravity, actually, you can figure out by the way it's formulated is you have what's called, this is how you calculate the force between two bodies. I think you guys have probably done this. You have the two masses over the radius squared multiplied by Newton's gravity, which is denoted by capital G, which is a constant, which is something that was determined experimentally and verified, and it works in these equations on a macro
It's
scale.
all coming back to me.
Yeah, the good review here. Yeah, it's all coming back to me too. Yeah. So, anyways, to answer your question, is that, well, if you're away from these bodies, you would not be influenced by the gravitational pull of anything around you. However, your own existence within the vacuum of space, if we're there, is going to still be exhibiting. It's going to still be influencing the gravitational field. So your mass and your size is going to be still affecting it. For a placeholder for now, if gravity was indeed a quantum field theory, or any kind of force field, which it clearly is, not clearly a quantum gravity field, but a force field of some sort, you would still be interacting with that field.
Got it.
So I don't know if that's like where you were kind of.
No, I guess I just thought that because you were saying how gravity doesn't seem to fit in any of these equations, or it always seems to break down, that I thought,
Right.
well, maybe it's not as important or it's only important because we're on Earth,
Oh no,
That's what I
it
thought,
is.
you know?
It is. It's how important it is that it is what is holding us back from. How do you say this? From breaking through a lot of barriers in current modern physics.
Okay.
Is having having a better formulation and description of what is actually happening on the micro scale. We know, like, on the macro scale, clearly what is happening. We use it in engineering all the time, and we can calculate precisely, the gravitational pull amongst bodies.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you get down to the scale of quantum mechanics, that's where it breaks down.
Oh, okay, got it.
So it's when you go down, to the scale of where quantum, the laws of quantum mechanics take over, and all of what we think, or the laws of physics, completely break down. That's where gravity no longer has a description and can no longer be represented in the field equations and the theories that are available now.
Mm.
You run into the singularities, or the infinities, essentially, in the equations, kind of like dividing over zero kind of thing.
Right.
Like you divide over zero, that just is it's a lot. It's not an operation. I think there's some branches of math to where it's arguable, but as far as is where we're at with this, it's something that is forbidden, essentially.
Right.
And that's actually a good thing, because it tells you that there's more to be discovered, and that you need to look elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually happening now.
Yeah.
We're actually at a paradigm shift. Well, not just the world, but the field of where modern physics is as well.
I mean, at this exact moment, because based on what's been discovered up to this point.
Yeah.
Really.
Yes.
What's changed?
So, the LHC at CERN.
LHC. What is it?
Excuse me. The Large Hadron Collider.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
where they're
Sorry.
doing those high energy experiments where they're
Yeah.
basically smashing
Smashing
protons
atoms.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that program, let's see, there were quite a few that were predecessors to that.
Mm-hmm.
There's Fermilab, the Tevatron, and they have LEP with the leptons, and Hera. There's a lot of them, but the LHC at CERN is where most of the big experiments are being done in conjunction. They're in collaboration with all of the places that are doing this, but they have the biggest operation.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that did, the last really good or big thing that it did, was discover the Higgs boson in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the kind of missing piece of the Standard Model. And that was a really, really big deal. And it actually unlocked, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, the Higgs boson, that was 2012, but I know they just recently relaunched some more particles or something not that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, what were you saying about the Higgs boson? I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. No, that's a good point. Actually, I can kind of add to that a little bit. So that was sort of the missing piece to the Standard Model of particle physics.
Okay.
So you have the Standard Model describes everything except for gravity, right?
Right.
So you have 3 generations of matter. For the leptons, which are the electrons, so that's considered in a family of leptons, as 2 other generations, which you have the muon and the tauon, and these are all heavier in mass. What that means is they're higher energy. There's the mass energy equivalence. Einstein's E equals mc squared is very much relevant in these experiments.
Right.
And so essentially you have the leptons, then you have the fermions, which are the quarks, bosons, and hadrons. I'm going to organize this for you guys. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
The bosons, because I'm also trying to distinguish how to describe this as well, keeping in mind that I don't know if you guys want me to go too far down like a technical rabbit hole or not, or
I mean, just to whatever you think is relevant.
Okay.
Know? I mean, also, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just being mindful of I don't want to get lost in like jargon that like everyone's just tuning out, you know, like what the fuck is this guy talking about?
Bosons.
Yeah. So like,
Boson talking
maybe,
about.
Yeah,
sorry,
no,
guys,
no.
I ruined your audience retention.
No, not at all, not at all.
Yeah, so the standard model describes everything that we fundamentally know, as I said earlier.
Right.
So you have hadrons, which is the Large Hadron Collider, you know, and the hadrons are going to be like your neutrons and your protons, and you're colliding those together. And within those are quarks and gluons. The quarks are what are the fermions, and they're called that because you have 2 main families, fermions and bosons. And we don't have to get too bogged down in the details, but one of them has different what's called spin statistics than the other. Okay. So one of them is a half integer spin, like electrons spin up, spin down. Chemistry, you learn like, you know, I think Hund's rule or something, you're doing spin up and spin down. You're like, what is allowed, and you cannot violate, the Fermi principle. Like you can't have 2 spin up electrons. It's spin up and spin down. So there's some certain rules with that. So that's like the half integer spin. Then the bosons, which are the force carriers, I'll elaborate on that in a second, are integer spin, meaning 1, 2, just whole numbers, right?
Okay.
So the fermions are like your electrons or your quarks. Then the bosons are actually force carriers. So remember when I described the 4 fundamental forces?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So each one of those have what's called a mediator or a force carrier associated with them. A really good example is the photon, right? Is the constituent of electromagnetic field, and it essentially is what carries light. Like the photons from the lights are hitting our eyes.
Right.
That's what's transmitting the electromagnetic force through the field, the electromagnetic field, and then reaching our eye or reaching wherever it's going to go. So these are the forces essentially being communicated or transmitted through their respective fields. And the bosons are, and it goes a little deeper if we get into gauge theories, but the bosons are essentially what are the mediators of this force. And so each fundamental force has a boson associated with it. And so with the photon, that being the carrier of the electromagnetic force, sort of the communicator, you know. So
it's where photo comes from, the word photo.
Exactly, that is exactly.
Photon.
Yeah.
Little bit of
Nice. Yep.
knowledge.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
my contribution.
It's a good one. You have analogs to that depending on the force fields that you're dealing with. So each field is part. I guess the premise with particles don't really exist. They're all oscillations. They're basically they're wave mechanics in fields. So like let's say you have an energy field, and then you have an excitation that in a sense creates a ripple through its field. It's oscillating, and this is sort of an excitation. And if you measure that excitation, you're basically getting certain kinds of information about it. This will go deeper into some. If anybody who is an expert in physics is watching this goes into wave particle duality and the double slit experiment, but and others. But essentially, like the point of this being that you have fields that are at certain energy levels that are interacting and oscillating, and the photon is an excitation of the electromagnetic field.
Okay.
And that excitation is, for lack of a better way of saying it, having a photon sort of mediate the result of the excitation. I think that might be a chopped way of saying it. I'm trying to conceptually paint a picture here. And so each one of the forces have that associated. So the strong force, you would have the gluon. It's the kind of analog to the photon in a way, being that it transmits the strong force. And so to get back to, let's see. Let me regather a certain thought
Well,
here.
it was. I think we were trying to
keep
explain
on
the
track.
Higgs boson, right? We were trying to explain
Eventually,
what
yeah.
was so
That's
fundamental about there, where that even came from, and
that. So what's interesting is this is a good exercise for me to, because it's like there's so much background to sort of build upon. At what
Right.
level, do I build upon it? At what level do I understand it? There's like a lot of factors here, and also I do want to get to that, but I'm trying my best to paint a story here
Yeah.
and build up the concepts. And so thank you for letting me practice on your show.
yeah, no problem.
Professor
Yeah.
Teel.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna need a little work, but so let me organize this, because we can all bring this back to the standard model as sort of the centerpiece, and the three fundamental forces. Each one has an associated field theory or gauge theory. Gauge theory is just a mathematical way of sort of keeping what's called invariance amongst the different places in space-time. If you want to measure something here in space-time or there at a different location in space-time, the laws of physics are basically going to be the same. They're invariant no matter where you measure them.
Okay.
Basically, like, you're not going to measure some like gravity here, then go over here, and it's going to be different fundamentally. Like, so there's something called this is a huge branch in mathematical physics, is gauge theory, which essentially allows you to time evolve quantum mechanically while keeping invariant the laws of physics locally. They call it local. There's local and global symmetries.
Okay.
But locally, when you're time evolving, or if there's an interaction or you're taking a measurement, like, it's just ensuring, it's doing a lot more than this, but it's basically ensuring that the laws of physics are invariant or consistent no matter where they're being measured locally.
Okay.
Locally meaning space-time. Globally is a different, we'd have to go down another road, but I'm going to stay on this particular one for now. So anyways, you're essentially having, these are just mathematical descriptors that are allowing us to form what's called representation theories. So we're going to get back to the Higgs boson here in a second. That story is, it's pretty loaded, and I'm going to get through it in a way that is going to be my best, but it might be a little rocky here and there.
Okay.
And also feel free to stop me at any point
Yeah.
to like interject and be like, hey, can you elaborate on that? Because
Sure.
I
Yeah.
kind of will just be running with this. Also not used to hearing myself with headphones on and the mic too. So there's a lot of like new sensory input happening.
Heck yeah.
So sort of the lay way of the Higgs boson, or as it was presented in popular media, or when it was being discovered, the God particle, which I hated that name, but
Yeah.
I understand.
That's how I heard it. That's how I heard it described. The God
Yeah,
particle.
that is not physicists doing that. It's
Yeah,
like,
sure.
but it essentially is, we were told what gives matter its mass, right? It's
Okay.
what gives things its mass, like on a very fundamental level. Like, why do things have mass at all? What is
Right.
mass? Okay, we know that this has mass. I have mass. I can weigh myself. I see what magnitude it is at some scale. It's like, okay, well, fundamentally, quantum mechanically, what is happening and where is the mass actually coming from? It's kind of a weird thing to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually I still struggle with this concept, and it was the Higgs boson and a very specific process is actually what sent me sailing down the road of what I did my thesis on, and just that whole exploration process was this very mechanism.
Okay.
So it's been a work in progress for some years now, enough to where I can give you some decent detail on it, and give you some things that are gonna sound maybe like Greek, but then also try to meet them. That's if you haven't like been living in theoretical physics, it's like that's like, okay, where do I meet this with the concept? And with the Higgs, it's a good exercise for me. So now that we kind of have the standard model pieced together, it's just descriptor, fundamental forces. We have field theories associated with them, with which, in a mathematical framework sense, can be thought of one of the, if not the most accurate and best formulation as of now, that describes reality. And quantum field theory is what underlies the standard model. And so, with that being said, you have, here's where I'll start. We have something called group theory. So if you were, I'm not going to go too into detail, I just want to paint another picture here. So the standard model is what's called SU3 cross SU2 cross U1, and this is the gauge symmetries. This is what's called Yang-Mills theory. And essentially, that is a broad stroke way of describing a lot of what I was describing with gauge theories and kind of how things are represented with the mediators and the particles and how you keep them invariant, et cetera, et cetera. So the point here being is just that there is a mathematical framework, and it has to do with group theory. And out of this group theory, you have certain what's called irreducible groups, and you have certain ways to actually get the mediators, or what's called the generators, which would be the photon or the gluons, all the gauge bosons. And so the group theory, along with several other branches of math merged together, essentially allow you to have a representation theory that works and matches experiment.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about physics as well is that the pure mathematicians often get a little upset at what we do with their equations. So apologies, mathematicians. We mangle them quite a bit, but it's for good reason, I think, debatably. And so a lot of this is actually, they call it hand waving. A lot of this is actually by hand manipulating things to get them to match experiment, and there is a history of doing that. And essentially, it's like you don't have the exact solutions to this stuff, so it's not quite fudging. Like, I don't want to give it a bad rap. It's not like things are being made up out of thin air. It's just that the search for the symmetries in the math to describe properly a theory was a hell of an endeavor. And group theory was one of the successful ones that underpins the standard model. And that's important for now because the SU3 part represents the strong nuclear force. And the 3 comes from, well, you have 3 quarks. We really have 6, but you have a quark and its anti-quark. So you have 3 quarks, then its anti-partner, which makes a total of 6.
6, yeah.
But then you have, just to cut short through this, the SU3, if you go through its rules, you will also get the 8 generators, which is the gluons. There's 8 gluons that are associated with the strong force as well. So the point of this being is that it is a mathematical framework that accurately gives you what you need to represent what is happening in experimental results. Yeah. Then the SU2 part is the electroweak or the weak force part. You can think of that as every electron or lepton has a partner, which is a neutrino. So if you have an electron, there's also an electron neutrino. If you have a muon, there's a muon neutrino. So there's 3 generations of those neutrinos associated with each. 1 generation associated with each generation of lepton. They're both leptons, the electron neutrino. These are what they participate in the weak force and the strong force. I'm going to glue this together in a minute. The point to take away from that is that among the 3 forces, as well as gravity too, but it's excluded from this conversation,
right,
they also interact with each other. So from there, if we were to take a specific process, like let's say beta decay, which is, let's say you start with a neutron, then you go, okay, a neutron has 2 down quarks and an up quark. Those are the 3 quark flavors, they call them flavors, that make up the neutron. And then the proton has 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. So there's a difference of an up and down quark. So in order for a neutron to become a proton, you need one of the down quarks to transition into an up quark. Mm-hmm. This is where I was staring at the whiteboard in undergrad, I believe, at what they call Feynman diagrams. and seeing the process from the up, down, down to the up, up, down, so neutron to proton. But then all of the things, so that's the input and output. So neutron, okay, then ends up a proton somehow. How did that happen? So now I'm back to my analog to digital converter question again.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I hit a wall and I hit it pretty hard, you know?
Yeah.
And looking at the Feynman diagram, you have what is called a W boson. And so the W plus and minus and the Z bosons are the mediators for the weak force. Just like the photon is the mediator of electromagnetic, and the gluons are the mediators of the strong force. So now we're in the SU2. We're not going to get bogged down with the descriptors, the SU3 across SU2, but just to lay it out there on the table.
Right.
The SU2 part is when I went down the electron neutrino road, because those two, what they call doublets, are what make up the doublet, the SU2 part. So you have two components. Electron, neutrino. Then you have three flavors of quarks, up, down, strange. That's with the SU3 part. So you're just sort of one-to-one at the representation of each one of the fundamental forces. Then U1 is, well, you have one photon.
Okay.
So like you have the number of mediators per theory, and it's represented by a group theoretic operation that then spits out what you need to represent experiment to an extent. But with that to the side, back to beta decay. On the output, when that proton is produced, if you will, you also have, via conservation laws, an electron and an anti-electron neutrino that is also emitted with it. And that's because energy has to be conserved, and these go back to something deeper called Noether's theorems. I mean, Noether was a physicist in the 1920s or 30s. She participated in the quantum mechanics boom, which was late 1800s to about 1930s or so. I mean, it's still being formulated now, but just basically like the inflection point of quantum mechanics becoming well represented and known was back in that day. And I think she was one of the first women to get a Nobel Prize, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, she had, her contribution was describing properly what's called internal symmetries and the conservation laws on that level. And just to add that to that, when you get the anti-electron neutrino being emitted along with the new proton that was formed through this process, within a black box for now, it's because it's needing to conserve the energy in the process, which isn't all the way true, which that statement's going to take us to the Higgs boson in a second. Okay. It is true, but it appeared to not be for a little bit, and it almost looked like the end of physics as they knew it, as the community knew it. Yeah, exactly the look that they all had, I'm sure, at the time. And that's actually what fascinated me, was that particular point right there. So I'm going to continue to try to piece this together.
Yeah.
At what point in time were you in your, I guess, degree or?
Yeah, I was probably in my last year. I was probably
undergrad?
Yeah, in my last year of undergrad. Because I was focusing on neutrinos at that time. And inevitably you have to look at beta decay, because they're produced in that process. They show up in a lot of different things, but
That's interesting.
process dependent. Yeah, neutrinos are very interesting. They're actually one of the least understood particles that we know about. Excuse me. So, anyways, when we have the conserved quantity, which isn't the most important part of this right now, but my question mark was on the W boson that was mediating the process. I was like, what is happening? I do not have any background or sufficient knowledge of what that thing is doing there. So you have input and output, neutron, proton. Then there's something happening in between, and there's an exchange happening. A W boson is being exchanged. Where is this being exchanged? So that sent me down yet another rabbit hole. And it was just the last year of grad school that it started clicking. And essentially, so when it comes to QCD, which I'm now introducing, it's short for quantum chromodynamics.
Okay.
That is the name of the interaction theory, or quantum field theory, that is the SU3 strong nuclear force. And the chromo part comes from the color representation I also forgot to mention that the you have a red, green, blue representation for the quarks in what's called color charge. The gluons are what's responsible for the color charge. Those are the analogs to the photon of the electromagnetic spectrum. I keep bringing it back to the photon because we all know what, in general, what the photon is. But once we get to like gluons, it might be a little more esoteric if you haven't gone down those roads. So they're just the force carriers, and that's where the chromo part and the quantum part comes from, with the quantum field theory, and all of this is being looked at on the microscopic scale.
Do they actually emit this color, or is it just a color that's assigned?
No, it's just an amount. It's just physicists being, we need to represent it with something. Let's give it colors. And there's also, actually, I take partially that back. There is a good reason for it. When you combine the colors, when you combine all of the colors, you get white light, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a colorless, what's called a colorless object, that is called a bound state hadron. A bound state is where the quarks and the gluons are bound in a state, which is the proton or the neutron.
Yeah.
And one more of several very important factors here is that you cannot actually pull two quarks apart. They always come in pairs or threes, or there's more being discovered now, which is going to play into your additional particles comment that you've made. There's not additional particles, there's additional bound state combinations that are being discovered. I can elaborate on that in a little bit. But it has to do with the constituents of the quarks and gluons, of what they're finding at different energy levels. But anyhow, so...
does it have to do with red shift or blue shift at all?
That's a little different. So
okay, I'm just curious. Red and the blue, red shift, blue shift.
That's going to have to do with
expanding or contracting, or the universe is expanding or contracting, moving in a certain direction.
That has to do with relativistic effects. Okay. No, that's a good question. Actually, that's like the Doppler effect, kind of. Not quite, but it is. When you hear a siren coming towards you, it's pitching up.
Right.
When it's going away from you, it's pitching down.
Right.
Because it's the speed of sound in that medium with the speed of the vehicle is additive. And so that's actually causing it to compress and become a higher frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Lower frequencies are more elongated. Right. Higher frequencies are more,
shorter.
And so then when it passes you by, the speed of the vehicle is being subtracted from the speed of sound as it's traveling back to you. So now it's like a contrary.
Right.
And so now it appears to you in your reference frame. This is actually a really great point you brought up, because it kind of introduces a little bit of special relativity, which is extremely important. Quantum field theory, by the way, is the merging of quantum mechanics and special relativity. Because we're studying things on the quantum scale, and at colliders especially, they're traveling near the speed of light. So you have to take into account the relativistic effects. That's built into the equations with the Lorentz transformations and some other Lorentz invariant things. But the redshift and blueshift, primarily, like the great example is in cosmology. You have the starlight reaching Earth from billions of light years out, right?
Right.
It's redshifted because of the expanding universe, which I believe is still believed to be expanding. At least a lot of this data is saying that it is. I think there's some areas of exploration there, but the light is traveling contrary to the direction of the universe expanding from the so-called Big Bang, right? And apparently accelerate. So they do know it's expanding. It's the accelerating part, I think, that are unsure about, which would be where the dark energy comes in. But that's also another area of focus that is unsolved. So anyways, the redshift is the light traveling contrary to the direction of the expansion of the universe. So essentially the medium the light is traveling or propagating through is going against, the direction of what it's traveling in, moving in the opposite direction. That's causing the wavelength, because light is a wavelength. Everything is wave mechanics on the scale, which is really, really interesting. And so that is being elongated, and you have to actually take that into account. It's called a Z factor. So the redshift factor is Z in the equations, and astronomers and cosmologists use it quite a bit. It's also, I think, how the Hubble parameter was discovered as well in the 1960s by Edwin Hubble. Let's see. So the Higgs boson, that's where we're at, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're on UCD.
Yes. Do you still have an audience?
Yeah, actually, we've doubled.
I'm being.
We're four.
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I don't. I hope this is interesting.
This might
I
be a
really
good
do.
time to reach out to our viewers if y'all have any questions you want to chime in. The chat box is open. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to answer questions from you guys.
for sure, Mikey J's on board today. Shout out to Mikey J.
Mikey J?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good buddy of ours.
Good
Nice.
friend of ours.
What's up, Mikey J?
Yeah, I got 4 viewers, so the other 3, please chime in. Let me know you're
Cool.
here.
Yeah, so let me slow down a little bit. I think I'm rushing. I don't know.
No.
I feel for some reason like time is pressed. I don't know why.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No.
So
There's no pressing.
all right. So the field theories, the gauge theories, the representations, a little bit of group theory. We essentially have this picture. I know that we have beta decay on the table, and let's see, the W boson. So the radioactive force being described or mediated by the W. There's 3 of them. There's W plus and minus, then there's a Z. W plus and minus are electrically charged. The Z is neutral. So that's important for a lot of things, but for this discussion, it won't be too important.
Okay.
And it turns out, so I have to go down the road, and I'll continue formulating this because I think that even at times it might be a little over my head. If it's over people's heads, I think that's still fun. That's maybe what I was worrying about a little bit. Because it's like some of it I'm still, to be honest, like this is a lifelong endeavor. So I'm also hitting like roads of like, should I go down that road? I'm gonna hit a dead end. I'm getting to, so just premising with that. So not to undersell myself, I think that this stuff is amazing, and I have spent quite a bit of time. So hopefully enough. So let's see. I think I'm going to begin with the vacuum. So there's a vacuum essentially, right? We have like a condensate is what they call it, and the primary thing about this to know is the vacuum is a non-zero energy. And another way that you can think about it is the vacuum has quantum particles that are popping in and out of existence, allowable by what's called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Which is a very important concept, especially in quantum mechanics. It's one of the first things that you learn. It says that essentially the more that you know about the position of the wave function, the less you know about its momentum, and vice versa. The more that you know about its momentum, the less you know about its position. And that is in part a measurement or observer effect, and also just the nature of how these systems are probed when you're taking the measurements. There's a lot of quantum mechanics is not well understood on deep levels. It's enough to continue pushing forward and to build technology, but when it gets to the fringes, like way out to where the roadblocks are being hit, no one actually claims to understand quantum mechanics.
It's the one thing I
It's-
kind of understand about quantum mechanics is that we don't know what the particles are doing when we're not observing them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what do I know about that? Yeah, that is
It's like they're affected by
the observer
observation.
effect, right?
the
Yeah,
observer effect.
that one's gonna that does tie directly into this, the measurement problem and the observer effect. So like that is a direct consequence, yeah, of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and I'm being careful here because there's a way it's postulated, and there's some consequences in the way the experiments are done, and I think the important thing to take away from this is that it is the limit within which the virtual, they call them virtual particles, so that's going to be something, the word virtual is going to come up quite a few times, is something that occurs in the vacuum, and it is allowable by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle within that time constraint. As long as it does not violate that, it is something that is seemingly allowable. And where that plays a role in the Higgs boson and the W boson mass, which is mediating the beta decay, is that the W boson and the Higgs boson are intimately related, it turns out. And this is actually where the Higgs mechanism is taking place. And it's taking place on the level of the vacuum. And it turns out that the non-zero, what they call vacuum expectation value, or BEV, of the vacuum is what is actually allowing what they call symmetry breaking. So in a minute, there's several pieces I have to tie together. In a minute, I'm going to hopefully try to make more apparent why I was stumbling around a little bit earlier, because I'm trying to put the pieces in order to a certain extent, to where um, when I add certain things, I want them to make as much sense as possible, right? So when it comes down to what's called symmetry breaking, so like the term associated with Higgs bosons is spontaneous symmetry breaking. And this is actually what's really, really interesting, because I was thinking in terms of spontaneous symmetry breaking. Why is it spontaneous? What is the symmetry that's being broken? And why and how? Like is it physically breaking a symmetry, or is it breaking, what is it breaking? That was very, very confusing. The term spontaneous symmetry breaking is what gives the mass terms and what is the Lagrangian. So the Lagrangian is basically, well, in a basic sense, it's the kinetic minus potential energy, and you can use it in mechanics to it's a better approach to Newton's equations, essentially, like F equals ma. You can approach all of this from a Lagrangian standpoint. The important part here is the Lagrangian is sort of like the main equation for plugging inputs in organisms. So you have the fundamental forces contained within what's called the Lagrangian. This is important because the symmetry of the Lagrangian, and here's another thing about the standard model that is not fudged, but it's justifiably this way, is set to zero. Like masses are set to zero. So the up and down quarks, which is what makes up the protons and neutrons, they technically have a very small mass. They have a measurable mass. These, however, are set to zero for the basic, for the theory starting with the Lagrangian. It doesn't stay that way, but that is a way to essentially what they call give a symmetry, a perfect symmetry amongst the relationship of the mathematical, I suppose, inner workings of how these constituents are working together. Let me unpack that a little bit. If you were to assume the quark mass is constant, and so coming back to when I said the SDG about well, there's something called a chiral division, which chirality of left and right hand. Like they say if you have something that's chiral, essentially, it's going to be the same on the left or the right hand. They call it left hand. Part about this is you have something called chiral or perfect symmetry with the masses to be assumed zero, but the quark masses are not zero. If you were to actually change the quark masses in those equations to be non-zero, well, the Lagrangian suddenly does not quite work anymore.
Right.
You run into a lot of problems, and that's the symmetry that's being broken. So the descriptor, the Lagrangian of that essentially is describing. Well, you get a lot of things out of it, and it's. We'll come back to the Lagrangian because the inputs, the value, and what we know about them are still being worked out. It's one of the main things that the LHC that is happening is working out the exact mass of these particles, because the better you know the mass, the more accurate that Lagrangian is going to represent what we think we know. So that's a big endeavor.
Instead of just setting it all to zero.
Yeah, so that's an effective field. That's what's called an effective field theory. There's a utility to doing that.
Yeah.
And so the question of, okay, this doesn't quite work anymore, and when we have the mass terms, what is breaking our beautiful Lagrangian? Like what is causing it to give? Because we know quarks have mass.
Right.
Well, the Higgs boson was for a long time thought to be giving the quarks its mass, or just all of matter. It's
mass.
It's right. And so with that, back to the W boson, when you have a force being transmitted, this W boson, or what they call longitudinal polarization vectors, a mouthful for a vector. And essentially, because you have polarity, you have to take into account like a spin, polarity. There's a lot of what's called quantum numbers with these, which isn't important right now. What's important is that there are certain quantum numbers that add up in a certain way with similar behavior. This is going to be an interesting way of putting this. Let me back up 1 second to where, let's see. So I can see in my head the process, but it's like, okay, how am I going to...
Do you need to draw it out by any chance?
No,
Will
well,
that help any?
if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, if it helps you, you know.
Well, not supposedly. I can draw you out like what that Feynman diagram looks like, in a sense. It's a very loose Feynman diagram. Let's see. Is this correct? I believe, let's see. May have drawn too many, it's okay. This is the neutron.
Okay.
The proton on the other side. This is the process that is called virtual. This is kind of a really rough sketch. And these are going to be up, down. So this mediating force in between the input and the output is taking place, and essentially all of this interesting physics that we're talking about is taking place in the vacuum. That's what's important, is the vacuum has a non-zero expectation value. It borrows energy from the vacuum. That energy that is borrowed from the vacuum is what breaks the symmetry of the Lagrangian, because now so I've decided that the longitudinal polarization vector, which is a fancy name for this W minus boson, is combining with the quantum numbers of... Another reason for the pause was what's called Goldstone bosons. And these are, the story of that is interesting, but there are Goldstone bosons that are absorbed virtually, meaning we don't see them in the output. The observable is not containing these bosons. All of this is happening within the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that time constraint, in the vacuum, and it is not observable. That's what makes it so difficult. We cannot actually we can verify indirectly that this is happening with the help of the group theory and all the symmetry. That's where the math sort of lends its hand, is, okay, you have these relationships and these symmetries, and this really seems to fit what's happening in these processes in a beautiful way.
Assuming the mass is zero, right?
Yeah, but then there's... Exactly. So for it to be a perfectly, symmetric or chiral theory, that's assuming mass is zero, where the Lagrangian equals 0. Total energy equals 0. Also, so all that means is that the conservation, you don't have a change in the input from the output. And so the electron and the anti-electron neutrino essentially are what are keeping the conservation from being broken. In a very short way of saying that, but essentially it's the addition. It's a very interesting addition of the quantum numbers associated with each of these fields that then I'm struggling with another thing, not because it comes down to like quantum mechanic potentials and things of this sort. Okay. But it has to do with potential wells, and it has to do with the vacuum expectation value of the Higgs is not actually its ground state value. It is at a different value than its ground state value. And essentially when it becomes perturbed and actually goes into a potential well, which is just a mathematical representation of the Higgs mechanism, it is what is essentially causing the Higgs mechanism, breaking the symmetry, giving the terms their mass. And it's, the short way of saying this is that it's all occurring in the vacuum. In a virtual process, which means internally, then you get the output. And the reason why the conservation laws were seemingly broken at the time, I think one of the other stories is the neutrino was not able to be detected, this anti-electron neutrino here. There's a different story behind that as well, but there was missing energy on the other side that they couldn't account for. And they thought that something was not, either the conservation laws were broken or they didn't know what they were doing. And it was more than likely that it was that they didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm going to pause on the Higgs boson in that respect for now, because I'm kind of like going down a rabbit hole that is consisting of trying to piece together frameworks on a certain level that I think is getting away from the conceptual viewpoint that I'm trying to paint. So if you don't, I can keep going, but I feel like I'm kind of going into a dead end here.
Yeah, no, that's, and you know what? Essentially, like, since, I mean, let's be honest, neither him or me are physicists, so a lot of this, you know, is over our head. No, trying to just understand what you're saying, you know, with the Higgs boson and just pretty much any of this. What I'm seeing is just a general picture of the experiments that are taking place at CERN, the things that they're discovering.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but just whenever they do run the experiments, you know, it's just furthering our knowledge and furthering, I guess, maybe answering the questions that have been left by other physicists, you know, in years past, and what everyone's been hypothesizing. And what
maybe either confirming or adding to the equations that already exist. Maybe
That's exact. Yeah. That's so like standing on the shoulders of giants kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, because you even said too, probably going down this, and this was a while back ago, but you had said that we were at like at a cusp, almost like a paradigm shift now of what we've understood up to this point to what we can now see is what lies before us now in the
it's
future.
Actually happening type thing.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious, like, well, what is it that they have discovered that, you know, seems to be, you know, marking this shift?
Yeah, no, it's a good segue point. Basically, the approach. So there is something called the scattering amplitude in quantum mechanics, which you're calculating the amplitude to get the probability of a certain outcome occurring with everything we just talked about.
Yes.
In all of these quantum mechanical processes, there's a scattering amplitude associated with it. And a lot of also what this rests upon is space-time, and space-time being fundamental, which one of the big shifts that it is thought to not be fundamental, which is probably the case. And so
that's
it's
huge.
not like it's emergent. So essentially it's emergent from somewhere else.
Yeah.
From something else. And to approach it, that's one of the main approaches they call it the space-time is doomed kind of thing.
What?
Which is kind of a funny, a funny way of just saying, hey, we're exploring different areas. And also, resting upon all of the progress that has been made is like perfectly said, this is a multi-generational collaboration that aggregates, and you kind of reevaluate where previous generations have left off, and they're kind of handing off the baton, right?
Sure.
And hopefully you have some astute people coming into the new generation, which there are, because it doesn't mean anything up to this point is wrong.
Right.
It's very usable, and it's very can I say that word? It represents well.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're all good. So basically it is not to be thrown away. Like Newton's laws aren't to be thrown away.
Right.
They describe our macro world well, but they break down in the limit of quantum mechanics. So that doesn't mean you throw them away, right? It just means that they're good for here, but we're trying to go here and they no longer work. So it's sort of that kind of push and pull.
Right.
When it comes to back to the LHC, which kind of began this whole thing, it seems as if they've hit their limit. And what I mean by that is the energy levels that we are able to probe at is only to an extent that is conceivable within, there's a lot of factors here. There's for one, the size of the apparatus is a big one. The budgets, the budgets available for funding these things, these multi-billion-dollar projects that you don't quite know are going to work out. If it's like explaining that to the government funding your project is an interesting feat.
Right.
And
I imagine Musk wouldn't mind putting up some money for it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know if he's in that space. That is interesting. Seems like he might do something like that, right?
I mean,
His
if
track
anything
record.
that would help his grand scheme of going to Mars and things like that, it sounds like this type of physics would be very useful in that.
Yeah, it could. Well, it could be. I wouldn't know. Yeah, the connections to that, because the scale they're studying at with the quantum, like the quantum field theoretic stuff, and the grand unified theories are pretty esoteric. And by the way, there may not even be one to be formulated by us. You know, it gets into these really like metaphysical and philosophical questions of like, what are we even capable of observing? You know, do we stop here? But there's more. Just
Gotcha.
it gets into some pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy.
territory.
That is heavy.
But with that being said, the LHC has limitations with the energy it probes at, which is 14 TeV or now. But you theoretically can still make calculations beyond that. I think there's a proposed 100 TeV, which is tera electron volts. And an electron volt is a measure or a unit. It's a way of measuring energy. It's what the units are. It's essentially what things are measured in high energy physics are electron volts. And so to scale that energy up, because you have to probe. So now that we did all of that, hopefully what was somewhat comprehensible introduction of the vacuum and some of the underlying mechanics, to use the vacuum in order to quote unquote probe the vacuum at certain energy levels. So the way you can think of it now is that you are probing the vacuum at an energy level, and you're going to get a corresponding result, like a resonance. So particles are actually resonances. They're not point-like particles that we're taught, as we learn about particles in chemistry and when we're younger. Those are just, simplified representations that work, but it's not like the whole story, right?
No, yeah, clearly, because you blew my mind with the electron and then the all that. I was like, hang on, wait,
yeah. So this is
I only knew of 3 subatomic particles, bro.
Yeah, this is good. This is good practice. I appreciate this. I hope not butchering it too much.
No, not at all.
So when it comes down to probing the fields, it's just think of it as you are at a certain energy level, that field ripples, or it becomes excited, if you will. So you have a field excitation. That excitation is essentially what the particles are. So if you were to, for example, an electron at its ground state, and another kind of complication to throw into this is that a lot of this has what's called running scales, meaning that its mass actually changes with energy. Well, the E equals mc squared relation, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So like the concept of mass even gets really kind of away from our everyday intuition, when you get into this realm. And that's another thing about it is literally reformulating how you're thinking about reality. And with quantum mechanics, you're never quite going to get to where you probably need to. There was an old saying by, I think, Feynman in the 60s. It was either him, might have been him, the shut up and calculate. Like basically don't conceptually try to figure it out. Just like, here's the math. Just shut up and calculate kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's it's kind of funny. It's like half serious, but it was to kind of illustrate that quantum mechanics is, don't try understanding it.
Sure.
I mean, try to understand it, but don't get bogged down with it, kind of thing. And so the electron occurs at around 500 mega electron volts, like 5.5. So it's like, I believe 511 mega electron volts. So that's just an example. The exact number isn't important, but that's just an example of an energy range that the electron's ground state exists at, that is being measured in units of electron volts. And then that is an excitation in a field that has certain properties. So the electromagnetic field, that excitation at a certain energy level or a resonance, like every system has a resonant frequency associated with it. I think a really loose basic example would be, let's say you're driving down the road, you have some change in your center compartment or something, and at 45 miles per hour, it doesn't make a sound. It's just kind of just there. And you hit 52 or 55 or something, and it suddenly starts kind of shaking. You hear it a little bit, kind of jingling around. Let's assume a smooth road here. Or I guess it wouldn't really matter too much, but essentially the movement that change amongst each other is in a way resonating. Like the amount of energy and the kind of energy that's being injected into that change that is dependent on the speed of the vehicle and some other factors with the road have started moving at that particular speed, but they didn't move at this speed. So you get certain excitation with an electron field or any of the fields. Each field to its corresponding force or particle is a certain sort of resonance of that field.
Right.
Those resonances is those energy levels are what you measure as the particles, and you have these resonances that can consistently show up with your measuring devices. And when you graph them out and have them represented visually, it's like, okay, we're organizing these resonances into families, and then going down the road of back to group theory, with the way that this complicated math sort of falls out, and its results are matching like how these particles are essentially organized in these different families with the different kinds of forces they represent, the different kinds of properties they carry, like whether they're mediators or whether they're actual particles that are making up matter. Like all these things are fitting beautifully together with this mathematical framework that is kind of incomplete, but it's working really well.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to like back to the resonant frequency example, I brought that up just for like a tangible example of like you have systems that have certain frequencies that they resonate at,
Right.
like or oscillate. I think in engineering majors, the Tacoma Bridge is like a really prominent example for it wasn't set up quite right, and I think that the wind was swaying the bridge, and it got to a point to where it started oscillating in the bridge.
Right. Yeah. the bridge
Just
goes up and
yeah.
down.
So that's like a primary example for mechanical. I think mainly mechanical engineers to study is that what caused that resonant frequency. The bridge had a length, it has a mass and suspension. This whatever is supposed to be countering that from happening failed, and it had a resonant frequency at this particular frequency that we did not for some reason account for. It's like every system has a resonant frequency. So every field has, if you will, a resonant frequency. And so let's see, to tie that back in with exploring and the paradigm shift, I think that there's a different way. So we have on the table right now space-time not being fundamental. It probably is emergent from something much deeper that we don't know.
Right. And
then we have the limitations of the LHC at CERN, like at what energy levels can we probe. And by the way, that's not the only where the LHC goes up to in terms of energy is not where the ceiling is for what's available to be probed either.
Right.
That's just where that's our limitations and what we're able to build. I think that it was theoretically postulated that in order to get to a grand unification scale, they theoretically know where that is. It's like 10 to the 15 or something like that. To get to that scale would require a collider that would essentially be the size of like the sun or something. Like it would it's just something that we're not going to build right now.
Yeah.
It's clearly, because that's another thing. There's a lot of things that you can theoretically calculate, just not verify. It's like, oh, the Higgs boson in the 60s by Peter Higgs was proposed like, hey, this should fit here. And then it was discovered 50 some odd years later. It's like there are predictions that come from these mathematical frameworks that enable you to, make the accurate predictions. And then that sort of provides you a roadmap to
prove them.
Experimentally approach. Yeah. So there's people working on different approaches to space-time. There's people different. The reason for that is like ultimately you're looking for let's see. There's supersymmetry that I haven't mentioned yet either, which is, I don't know if I'm going to go down that road, but like every particle has a supersymmetric partner. The grand unified theories, so physicists have always sort of had a dream, especially Steven Weinberg. He actually wrote a book on I believe, Final Theory of Everything, or I believe that's what it's called. Really beautiful book. And so like it's always been a goal to unify all of the four fundamental forces at a particular energy range. That goes back to at the beginning of the Big Bang. They postulate that the energy, all these force fields and their corresponding energies were unified as one. And it, for some reason, whatever happened with the Big Bang being the placeholder name, whatever happened, they eventually became separated as their individual forces that we know of today. But they started as one unified force.
Sure.
And then, through various conditions and epochs of that evolution had become separate and govern what we know of as it today.
Yeah. I like the Genesis sound of that, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's
You know what I
it's
mean?
quite a story.
Everything was one at one point, and then
Yeah,
Right.
singularity.
So getting back to that one would be like,
right.
bring us back to the beginning. Someone finally holds it like a Thanos figure. Finally is able to bring all the four forces together.
And then it
But
explodes again.
but then it explodes
And there's
again,
another
and then
big-
there's
big
a whole
bang.
nother universe now.
Yeah.
It's like
So
you can't handle that power.
Right.
You're saying that Thanos is who we
Yeah.
need to consult. I think
Yeah,
I think that-
yeah.
hang on a second.
I just said a Thanos-like character. I'm not saying Thanos himself, but
No, that's exact. It's like running the tape and rewind.
yeah.
In a sense. So yeah, another big area is actually looking for additional Higgs. There's Higgs that would occur theoretically at different energy scales, and the Higgs boson, the search for additional Higgs, ties in heavily with the dark matter searches, which is on the table, whether it's something that exists or not. And so that kind of actually is a good point to illustrate where physics is today, is that we have arrived to a pretty good place, but it's becoming more apparent that there needs to be different approaches from different angles of how we got here. Like it's a reevaluation kind of, which happens, this happens. It's a reevaluation that's building upon the previous generation's contributions and work, right? And so it's like, oh, well, maybe this wasn't quite right. Or maybe, this could be approached from this angle, or we're looking at this wrong. How can we reformulate this? And we have these toolkits that are built up to a pretty sophisticated level to sort of rest upon as well. So there's that as well. Back to the scattering amplitudes, there's some collaborations that are looking at calculating scattering amplitudes or the probabilities of these quantum mechanical systems without using the Feynman diagrams that I was alluding to earlier. The Feynman diagrams have been an incredible tool for representing input and output states on a diagrammatic level with, I'm going to introduce something else, what is called the path integral formalism. So this will be a good point to do this. The path integral sort of just gives you the input or the initial state, then the output. So in the case of the neutron to proton, you have essentially this state that you began with, an initial state. Then you had the transition amplitude, which is what the scattering amplitude. They're basically they're called matrix elements as well. These scattering amplitudes is what the whole game is about. I won't say whole game, but it's a big part of the game at the LHC, and where a lot of this is resting is calculating the scattering amplitudes of these processes. And so remember when we went back to, when we talked about the virtual processes.
Yes.
So this is where I'm going to start pulling from the things that I'd laid out, and I think piecing them together in a more clear way, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of throw all that out there on the table, and now I'm going to try to bring them together.
To connect the dots.
Yeah. So the scattering amplitude is the hard part because it's taking place in the vacuum, which is not directly measurable. It is indirectly observable based on inference, essentially based on what we know about the conservation laws, all of the empirical data, all of the theory and frameworks that have been built up, which are really, really solid. And some of this you're gonna have to take on faith for now that it works, but
Yeah.
there's room for improvement in a short way of saying that. So the scattering amplitudes are going to have to do with calculating this W boson, or the transition process that occurred virtually. They call it virtual because we can't see it and it's in the vacuum. Then the output occurs, and that is what we do observe. At the detectors, that's what you see. That's what shows up, and they know what, they know what they started with, right? The reason that's so hard is because you're not able to, as I said before, directly probe the vacuum in a sense to where you're getting all of the details of every interaction that's happening. You can think of it as, I've heard of the many worlds or the parallel universes. Like there's infinite numbers of universes.
Of course.
So that sort of that's actually an interpretation of quantum mechanics. There's two main schools of thought with that. One of them is that when these interactions are happening in the vacuum, it turns out that there are many different paths, if you will. This is where the name path integral came from. When you're thinking of like quantum mechanical amplitudes and you're thinking about the wave mechanics and how, let's see, I want to say interactions. I'll keep it that way for now. Let's think of like simple wave mechanics with interacting waves. And what's interesting about this is coming from a sound background, like all of the intuition about the phase and sort of the mechanics of the basic wave equations on that level are still relevant in this too. And like you're still thinking in those sort of same kind of fundamental parameters. So with that being said, if you have something out of phase, you're going to get cancellation. You're going to get constructive and destructive interference, right?
Okay.
And have certain kind of cancellations. Well, the same kind of concept carries into quantum mechanics because, again, we are dealing with oscillating fields. These oscillating fields, the harmonic oscillator that I alluded to quite a ways back, you can model these fields simply by starting with a bunch of harmonic oscillators connected together. And if you think of a bed or a mattress with tons of springs in it, and they're all oscillating together. Well, let's not think of the one that's vertical, but like if you had horizontal springs connected, like mass, spring, or space-time point, spring. When you have an excitation, there's going to be a transmission. You're going to have an oscillation. Like this harmonic oscillator in motion is going to then transfer its kinetic energy here. It's going to be essentially a chain reaction. You're getting an oscillation in the field or the system. They're connected. So there's a connectivity there.
Right.
The same exact thing comes into play in quantum field theory. That's actually how you start formulating the mathematical framework is you start with a harmonic oscillator. You have a few axioms and postulates. You build up the field representation. And then there's a lot of other things that you do to get it to the point to where it starts representing like physical systems like this, but it all comes back to the harmonic oscillator, and which goes back to the unit circle,
Right.
which obeys the same wave mechanics that we see in the ocean or the sound, or excuse me, with sound or in the ocean or anything that has a periodic nature to it, which were the equations I had somewhat discovered when asking the AD question, analog to digital converter question. So this all started kind of coming together in a really neat way.
Dots,
yeah, and that's I'm kind of putting that back to earlier in the conversation to when you would ask me about what it's kind of sparked my interest and brought me into physics, and I started telling you about the converters and the music stuff. This was another layer to that. Was like, oh, this is connected fundamentally in certain ways, and you can think of it in similar ways and kind of piece it together in this way that is kind of familiar. So
do you think the people who created the A to D converters and D to A converters, do you think they understand all this?
Oh, I don't know. Some of them might.
Do you think they just know it works and they just do it?
No, to do that some of them might. I mean, a lot of them do have physics backgrounds. Yeah. I'm sure. They're teams of people. I think so. That is in the DSP world, like the mix. I think it's called mixed signal, which is like analog and digital, right? Yeah, that's like chip design, like nanotechnology, transistor. Yeah, that is. I don't know the details of designing an AD or DAC, but I don't. The only thing that I can think of that would come in to play on the level of nanotechnology is that the transistors exhibit something called quantum tunneling. So quantum mechanics is actually the discovery of quantum mechanics allowed for the design and conceptualization of the transistor. Like that quantum mechanics is responsible for your phone, your computer, the sound going to the AD. Like it enabled essentially the transistor to be designed. The transistor works on quantum principles, namely tunneling. Tunneling is a concept to where again, coming back to the probability well of, let's say you have a barrier, and there is, in short, there is some probability that, let's say, an electron will tunnel through this barrier to the other side. It's like me standing on that side of the wall, then suddenly appearing on the other side spontaneously.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
But in theory, there is a very, very, very minuscule chance that it will. Tunneling is not exactly one-to-one with that concept, but just to illustrate, like, the concept of tunneling through a wall, like what it is essentially there's a barrier there that is
Impenetrable?
no, well, it's, let's see. Quantum mechanics says there is a probability for it happening, and then it does happen. And I'm trying to connect that with the operation of the transistor. There is, because you have like Pn, NPN, like negative, positive, negative. You have different ways that these things are doped because you have the charge. Like in computers, transistors are making up the on and off, which is, does it have this voltage or not, right? And I am forgetting the tunneling aspect of it playing a role in its operation. But it is important. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So the tunneling is very important, and it needed to be taken into account for in transistor design, which opened up all of this.
All the technology that we have now.
The computers and just, everything
I feel like
on that sense.
I feel like I heard a theory that basically went like, you know how everything's getting smaller and smaller.
Moore's law, yeah.
Right. So we're reaching a point where it can't get any smaller because there's going to be, I guess, some on a quantum level things that like jump unpredictably, you know, because
I've not heard that part of
things
it.
are just so close together. You know what I mean? Like the microchips are getting smaller and smaller. Like, well, they can't go infinitely small. You know what I mean? They're going to reach a point where it's just too small and things are going to be so unpredictable. Like, we're not going to be able to control them and make them do what we want them to do.
If they get that small?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So there's like a point of no return kind of, I guess, with this.
Yeah.
Like an event horizon sort of like.
Yeah, that's
like if we cross that and then we're in some shit.
Yeah, basically like the technology in our cell phones is only going to get, you know, so good because, you know, we can't pack as many microchips as closely together or something like that. So.
Okay. Because it just won't work.
Yeah, they'll just be unpredictable. They'll just start doing random things on their own.
No, yeah, that is correct. That is, I believe, Moore's law.
Yeah.
I think that actually has to do with the limitations of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. I think.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but yeah, no, that's a very interesting. I don't know where that goes. I know that there's additional technologies. I don't have domain knowledge in that area.
So then, what is this nanotechnology? Right, things that are supposed to be like on a atomic level, right? Do we get smaller than that, or are you saying it can't get any smaller than that?
Yeah, it can't get much smaller than that.
None that.
Yeah.
But even that's pretty remarkable. Is it not?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What's nanotechnology that you're talking about?
I don't know. When I say nanotechnology, I'm thinking of like freaking robots and shit. Like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or just like technology you can have like within your body or something. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's coming to mind. That's just my own sci-fi.
Yeah.
And pop culture sci-fi.
Right.
That's all I have of it.
Right.
Yeah, nano. That's the scale of where the microchips are engineered at. Like all the silicon stuff with your motherboards and stuff. No, that's robots. Yes, actually, do you guys know a lot about robots?
Negative.
No.
I don't either. No, I'm asking because maybe you guys can.
No, I ain't gonna be able to school you on robots.
Yeah, robotics is amazing. We're in a crazy time for that right now.
Yeah.
Robots and AI.
And AI. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know where. It's like you can see the trajectory of some of it, but I don't know where. Like you said earlier, there's some scary stuff that could be possible. Then there's great stuff, like amazing things as well.
Would AI be able to help solve any issues that physics is having currently right now?
That is being employed. Yeah. So a lot of the neural networks and machine learning algorithms that are running most everything now are being used to look for different insights and also to run through the data? Yeah, that's a really good question. It most certainly is. And actually, it's really new. Machine learning's been around for a while, but it's really like taken a hold of some of their main approaches like the last 5 years, 7, 8 years, something like that. So that's like another way of discovering deeper insights or correlations amongst like really dense data sets in a way. Because let's see, I'm trying to think of a really concrete example of where machine learning is used. And right now, as far as particle physics goes, right now I think it's mainly just because I haven't used it personally for these things, but right now, for example, you can set up an algorithm. Say you have a dense data set, and I want to bring this back to another introduction, but I might save that. I think the simplest way to put it is that it's helping them gain additional insights with correlations amongst their data. Sure. That's probably just a good way of putting that. Okay. To answer your question, absolutely. It's at the beginning. That's another thing, like all this stuff, the new technology, we're like at the beginning of it and aren't even fully aware of where it could go. It's like, that's another thing, but yeah, I'm not sure where I was at with the discussion prior. I was running on about, I know we're going on about the Higgs boson, but I'm at a point where if you guys want to like really change the tone, I'm totally down for that.
You had just mentioned another theory about like it's only so small we can go with technology before things start jumping around.
That's right.
Kind of went on a nanotechnology tangent or whatever, but
that's all I know about that. It's just that we're getting
I don't know much more.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where it's like you can't get much smaller, much more compact anyway, just on a...
Yeah, but you had mentioned that in response to what he was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think things jumping, the probability of, something appearing...
On the other side of a
barrier, right, just randomly.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of reminded me of that thing that I'd heard about just the probability of things just jumping, I guess on a circuitry level, just like, what travels down circuits? Is it electrons or...
Yeah, essentially that. Yeah,
just like jumping across to the next circuit over. I'm just imagining everything getting so close together. Yeah, shit's just jumping back and forth, in ways that we don't want it to.
That's correct. I really looked this up. I really think that it is limited by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is quite literally like you can get a length scale from where you are no longer allowed to do this kind of technology. I believe that is a big part of how Moore's law is calculated, which, that's perfectly said. Yeah, things are just getting tighter and tighter and tighter as they're getting more complex and cramming, if you will, more transistors and things into this nanotechnology, that essentially it's going to break down at a fundamental physics level. And that's exactly the right way to think about it. And I think that it's Heisenberg. It could be wrong, but yeah.
But once we get to that point, then would it be? Am I thinking of this in the wrong ways? Are we at the crux of our knowledge, or I guess the crux of our limitations? Right, it's as far as you go.
Yeah,
it's as far as we could go.
As far as just like electronics is concerned, maybe, or like, circuitry or whatnot, maybe. Then the cell phones just have to keep getting bigger.
Or then we have to go the other way.
We go opposite.
All right, we can't get smaller. We just got to get bigger.
Where would machine learning and things like that be at that point? I guess what I'm talking about, or what I'm thinking about too, is what's this idea that technology is constantly like advancing at a certain power, like every exponentially every so often, right? So, does that have a limit too? And when it reaches that limit, where are we at?
That's a good question. I mean, maybe it does reach a limit. That's kind of like where that other principle. What was the principle where we're all in a virtual simulation theory? Yeah. It's like, do we reach that level? Where technology is so good that we either are currently in a simulation, or one day we'll be in a simulation where we won't be able to distinguish the simulation from the real world. It's like, will it ever get that good? that's pretty advanced.
That is.
There's a lot of computation right there, to try to mimic everything. The grand unified theory, if you will. That's computers mimicking things that we don't even know yet. No, we can't even compute on our own yet.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Will we ever get that far? Can technology ever get that good? I don't know.
I think AI would kill us well before
right.
itself reached this point. That's fascinating. Like the information sort of theory aspect of it. Yeah, that is another interesting field. Just to play on that, like the machine learning stuff, back to like the correlations and the insights, is giving us deeper insights that weren't previously, achievable. So it's like I envision that building upon, sort of compounding,
Yeah.
and then going right into exactly what you're saying. Like, where is that, like, exponential curve? Where's the limitations of where that thing stops? And I don't think anybody actually.
No, nobody knows until we get there, I guess. And it seems like we're like on a train, like full steam ahead in that direction, whether for good or for worse or whatever. You know what I mean?
It's hard to tell right now.
Yeah, So
no one's gonna stop that from happening.
It's
because it's already. I mean, unless you just. I mean, you can't stop it because someone's gonna always continue it.
Unless all the scientists and physicists and everybody just said, "Hey, you know what?
Out.
We're done.
Or
we're just gonna stop for our own good." I think if we go any further,
there's a point of no return.
This one guy's like, "Well, actually, I'm just gonna take all that information. I'm just gonna do this."
Yeah.
Like monopolize.
Yeah. Just some rogue scientist.
Right, a rogue scientist.
That with it. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know. It is an interesting time we're living in. So no doubt. I feel like it was obviously everyone probably says this, and now I guess we're getting a little philosophical, but you look at the times in the past, right? And it was a lot simpler. Things were a lot simpler. Things were whatever, and now here we are, and just again with everything that we're standing upon and what lays before us, it's like, clouds or complicates or just so many questions of uncertainty. But what's funny is if you were to go back then, they probably felt the same exact way. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't know. I guess we're good at adapting. Humans, we're good at adapting, and and
our kids will know no different.
Yeah. They're the internet kids.
Yeah. They'll grow up now with AI.
Yeah. Now they're gonna grow up with AI doing their homework for them.
Right. Oh no.
Oh, we're already there. Chat GPT. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, actually, he has. You made an account. I'm sure you have an account.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't made an account yet.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have too many accounts.
Jump on the train. Man.
I'm just not making any more accounts. I'm done making accounts of anything.
Never again.
Yeah, no more accounts. I don't care. No, I'm just kidding.
Clock it.
I just haven't done it yet. But I know when we were talking about it last time, you signed up right away.
Yeah, we were messing with it.
Yeah.
I think
You've tried it though, right?
Well,
we messed with it together.
Yeah.
I think we used it to write a few song lyrics.
We did
just to mess around.
You know what's funny is all this talk about physics. We could actually have asked ChatGPT some of this stuff. You know what I mean? And see what it had to say about it.
Yeah, is this guy like full of shit?
No, not even.
No, I'm making fun of myself.
Yeah. No, but just something we couldn't maybe hey, explain to me the Higgs boson in layman terms or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Really good.
And see what it could do.
Interesting. I might do that in a minute.
Yeah.
While y'all are talking, but yeah.
Let's see what it says.
I know we used it to just write some goofy songs last time.
One of them was about escaping the algorithm. Which that is a song that we're currently working on.
Oh no, okay.
So we're probably gonna ironically use ChatGPT to write a song to help write a song about escaping the algorithms of life.
Yeah,
that should be like the concept of the album.
I know it does seem like a pretty big concept.
That's really
I think the album title is going to probably be
Escape the Algorithm.
Yeah,
okay, that's actually. Yeah, I look forward to hearing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea of you do something over and over and over and over and over again, and it kind of builds your what is it build a lifestyle or just your brain starts to be accustomed or is expecting it even it's the same thing with drug addiction or anything else like that, right? It's all all those things. But all boiled down to what are you searching on your phone? What do you look at on social media? And all that stuff is being spit at you just based on that, right?
The
machine is saying, oh, he likes guns and knives and hunting, so we're just gonna throw all this
predicting,
all this other stuff at him and splice an ad in there because we want to make some money.
It's good and bad. I don't know. Playing devil's advocate, it's like, well, I mean, at least it's recommending things that are in line with your interests. But then at the same time, it's like, this thing knows too much about me.
Sure.
I don't know. There's that one. I'm still kind of not sure.
Or does it keep you? See, and it's for us, like when we were talking about it, we were also thinking, well, is it also imprisoning you? Right. Hence the idea of escape. Hence the idea of escaping it. Quit.
Yeah. But to escape into what?
Just something else.
Just something that is not an imprisoned, like you're imprisoned by, like.
Yeah, I mean, so
something more natural, maybe.
Let me put it like this: look at
what
Netflix.
Is natural though?
Oh yes, that's true.
No,
something more.
I didn't mean to.
Something more organic.
Yes,
I could say, not natural.
But then you can argue. So again, devil's advocate a little bit. Like, what is organic? What is natural?
Well, like you organically had a passion for physics, and you organically put knowledge in your own head and connected your own dots.
Oh, okay, I see.
As opposed to somebody, just like feeding it to you.
It is disconnected from.
Or even that. Look, check this out.
Or telling you.
Or how about algorithmically?
You should be interested in.
Algorithmically, I grew up in Houston, Texas, in the largest petrochemical complex in America, and now I'm a chemical plant operator. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
There's
a product of your environment kind of thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at, So escaping that, even your Netflix algorithm. If we were to be in Europe somewhere, it's not going to be the same programs that are going to be showed on my Netflix account versus those people over there, right? So it just is what it is. Okay. Product of your environment. Just the escape algorithm is just another way of trying to put that whole same concept. It's the very same concept.
No, it's interesting. It's fascinating.
So get out of your hometown and get into somebody else's hometown type thing,
and assume their algorithm.
Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave here and go to Montana and be a rancher. And people in Montana are like, you know what? I hate just grew up in Montana. I'm a damn rancher.
Right.
I'm gonna go to Houston to be a chemical plant operator.
Change up the scenery a little bit. Yeah.
Sometimes it's all you need to change scenery.
Yeah.
I guess.
I don't know.
To be happy or fulfilled, whatever it is, whatever we're searching for in life.
Oh man. Yeah.
By the way, I did get an answer.
Okay, what does ChatGPT?
I told ChatGPT to explain the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in layman's terms.
Nice.
Picked a random topic. So the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is a fundamental concept in quantum physics that states that there is a limit to how precisely we can measure certain properties of a particle. In particular, the more precisely we know a particle's position, the less precisely we can know its momentum and vice versa.
Oh, dude, that's exactly what he said.
You have to understand this. Imagine you're trying to measure position and velocity of a ball. If you measure the position very precisely, you'll disturb the ball's velocity and make it uncertain. On the other hand, if you measure the velocity very precisely, you'll disturb the ball's position and make it uncertain. So in quantum mechanics, particles are described as both waves and particles, and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle applies to both. So if you try to measure the position of an electron, for example, you will necessarily disturb its momentum and vice versa. This means there's a fundamental limit on how precisely we can know both the position and momentum of a particle at the same time. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle has profound implications for our understanding of nature and reality, and it's a key concept in many areas of modern physics, including quantum mechanics and quantum field theory. So that was its 30-second, 4-paragraph spiel on Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
I mean, it spit it out like that.
Spit it out just like that.
Oh yeah, it's completely insane.
I could regenerate response. Wonder if it makes it different.
Any different? It might reword something.
Yeah, it might vary, but like stay central.
It is kind of rewording it. Just flying in a room. Also trying to determine a fly in a room. Okay, so it's just using a different example.
Interesting.
Oh, that's neat. So it'll just maybe if you need to see it from a different angle, like a concept, it'll give you a different concept. I didn't know that it did that actually.
I definitely can see the usefulness of that. I know everyone's all like, "Oh, it's going to do kids' homework," but I mean, and let's just say you're having a hard time understanding something. You know what I mean? Maybe throw that in there, and it kind of just we're already using YouTube a whole bunch to help us learn how to shit. You know what I'm saying?
GPT's the
Now,
next YouTube.
obviously, that's not strictly computer generated, but still.
Well, now they're saying TikTok's the new YouTube, to where it's instead of 5-minute long videos, it's just the meat and potatoes, just the 15-second.
Yeah.
You know what you need to know.
Well, certainly when it comes to like those TikTok videos that show you like recipes or whatever,
Right.
yeah, those are put together pretty well.
Interesting.
Those are put together pretty well.
You know.
Matter of fact, if you could find a way to produce those type of videos, you'll probably make some pretty decent money doing
Probably
that.
just use AI to do it.
Yeah.
Just saying. I mean, there's AI art.
Yeah.
You know,
so now,
soon
why
there'll
not
be AI video.
AI cooking?
Well, yeah, it'd be AI video. So whatever it is, it'll
oh.
just show an artificial, representation of a person and ingredients. Just for I guess just for aesthetics. Instead of a human doing it, just an AI doing it.
AI art doing it.
Yeah.
Huh.
Then you watch it on your Oculus and you program.
Then you watch on your Oculus.
You have them literally in the 3-dimensional your virtual reality, showing you at a kitchen how to.
Right, and then it's your kitchen.
That'd be interesting.
And then it's you're grabbing your ingredients, and
It's like you're just mirroring.
Why don't
and then you don't even do it, and then you just have a robot doing it.
Yeah, then you're just
and then it's just
now we're literally in the Matrix where we're plugged up to.
Yeah.
That's actually that movie may have foreshadowed some interesting things.
Right.
About our
No
future.
doubt.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe
escaping the algorithm.
well, maybe not the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows, man?
I mean, that's a good.
Most of those movies are pretty good. Like, I mean, that Terminator, everything else. I mean, they all kind of delved into that, and they were written by some pretty decent people too. Was it James Cameron was the Terminator?
So.
What it?
Yeah.
It's a hell of a director.
Oh yeah.
And then the Coen brothers, right? Wasn't that who did
The Wachowski brothers.
the Wachowskis? There you go, Wachowski.
No, sisters.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that is a recent.
They did the
development.
Coen brothers.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I messed
Or
up.
I don't know.
Wachowski did the Matrix. Wachowski brothers did the Matrix.
I wasn't
and
aware
James
of that.
Cameron did Terminator.
Okay, that's right.
But you're right. They're the Wachowski sisters now.
Right.
Oh,
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Skynet.
I mean, was it nature mimic reality or reality mimic nature? Or what art mimic nature mimic art?
I don't know, man. I mean, I always thought that art was a mimic of or at least our concept of our reality, or
Right.
and it's all individualistic, right?
Right.
So all based on whatever your experiences are and what you've experienced in your reality will be displayed in your art.
Well, the art of these futuristic movies and things like that.
Oh.
Are we trying to make them a reality?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
I don't know. I hope not, because they all look pretty bleak.
Pretty
Grim.
dystopian.
Yeah.
Well, you got Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yeah, those are
exploring,
pretty cool. That's cool. I'm down
space
with
and the
that.
frontiers
Let's
of
go
space
there. And
things
I think
like
that's where
that.
Musk is trying to take us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, look, let's be real. Like, we are gonna have to leave this planet if our species is to survive, right? I mean, provided that we don't kill ourselves, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
But essentially, millions of years from now, what the sun's gonna go through its dying phase, and it's gonna freaking consume us. Even when it becomes just the red dwarf stage, it's gonna swell up so big that it's gonna burn everything on Earth.
Yeah.
Now that's a long ways out. I don't know where humankind is gonna be, but we certainly cannot still be here and survive. So we'll have to be somewhere
That
else.
is a fact.
That's crazy. And that's wild to think about. So
Have you seen that movie, The Time Machine?
yeah,
2002.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. That's a good one.
I always think of that movie when
I know.
when I think about the future of humanity.
Yeah.
This guy, builds a time machine, tries to travel into the past.
The
doesn't
actor's
work
name is
out.
Guy. It's Guy Pearce.
Is it? I may have seen that.
Yeah, it's a
It's
good
been a
one.
while if I have.
It's a good one, and it has Jeremy Irons in it. The guy who played Scar, the voice of Scar in Lion
Yeah.
King. Jeremy Irons, he's a good one.
Yeah.
Die Hard with a Vengeance.
So you'd recommend?
Oh,
I
sure.
don't think I've
Yeah.
seen that
good.
one.
Yeah, it's a good one. I
I might
remember
have to
being
put that on my
young,
Netflix list.
Yeah, I remember being a young kid watching it in movie theaters with my uncle.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it was really cool.
Nice.
Concept. Just a nice little getaway for an hour or two. I think it's a 2 hour.
Got your imagination.
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
yeah.
No doubt.
I love those.
Those are fun.
But basically, yeah, he goes into the future, in the time machine, he accidentally slips way, way, way into the future.
Okay.
Right.
And it's post-apocalyptic. I mean, he goes so far into the future that we've devolved into basically beasts, and then this species of super intelligent beings. So
I have seen. Is this where there's underground creatures?
there's
There's a
underground
voice.
creatures,
Okay,
yeah.
They're like all being programmed in their sleep. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
right. Or not?
I don't know
I
if
don't.
they're
That's not the
programmed.
right way. I'm
weren't.
also remembering vaguely too. But,
we destroy the moon. I know that one was a
Okay.
huge thing. Where
Yeah.
we go to the moon and we fucking start drilling.
Yeah, we're trying
or
to mine
whatever
it.
it is. Mine.
Yeah.
And then the moon just breaks apart. It just fucks with the gravity of the Earth and the moon and destroys, humanity as we know.
We just throw everything out of balance.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of what
The waves and fucking, the ocean's all out of whack and
that's literally what we're doing in certain aspects. I think
sure.
James Cameron, his Avatar is about something similar. Like, the corporations and mankind coming in and just fucking things up to a point to where it's no longer.
right, we just drill so far down to the Earth it just splits it in two.
Getting away from our essence.
to our own detriment, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that's just. I mean, hearing you talk a lot about symmetry with your physics, and it's like you don't. Well, I know you're saying there's some things that was breaking the symmetry, but I couldn't help but just in my head, because I don't understand physics that much, but I couldn't help but think to myself that I do know that, like, just the concept of symmetry, meaning like it's got to be like it's like a balance.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And things have to stay that way.
Yep.
And in order for it to survive or for it to propagate or whatever. And if you're gonna break that, it could be to your own detriment.
Yes,
you know what
that's
I mean?
exactly. Yeah.
And so I don't know.
Think
Again,
about it.
philosophically speaking, we like to delve into that. Cody and me will have these conversations all the time, where we just kind of just ramble on about whatever. But it always ties back. I love it. But it always does tie back to that whole like, hey man, let's just. It's so funny how it all comes back to like just be good to one another, right? And try to put out that goodness and that genuineness we were kind of talking about before. Yeah, exactly.
Like just the glue.
Yeah, all of that, man.
I agree.
All of that. It's so funny how it always comes back to that. And no doubt we have it within us to do the opposite, but I guess back to that balance. So, anyways.
Yeah. Mikey J chimed in.
Yeah.
What do you have to say?
Oh, he says, does this mean as we travel farther and farther through time that the universe will become less entropic because of the space in between particles and Hawking radiation? I'm not sure what that is. But he's talking about, millions and billions of years into the future.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that.
That's an interesting question.
Like when is he talking about like the universe expanding so much that eventually like nothing can exist anymore because it's expanded so greatly?
I guess so. Everything is like pulled further and further apart, throws off the gravitational fields and everything. Just kind of, destroys.
Dude, there was, oh my God, let me see if I can find that. There was a really cool video on YouTube that showed that. But what was even cooler was the, what was even cooler was the music that went with it. And it showed like, again, what would happen like, millions of years and stuff. And it just, up to the universe, from the Big Bang basically to its eventual death.
Okay.
And it was, like I said, there was a really cool soundtrack to it.
Yeah.
And
who did the video? Which
I know, I got to see if I can find it. I hope I can.
Yeah, there's
find
some.
that.
Yeah, it's amazing channels like that.
Yeah.
Did you watch Futurama at all?
I have
Futurama
seen.
My favorite cartoon other than like South Park. Or whatever,
I've not seen whole seasons, but I've seen some episodes.
Yeah, I've
pretty
seen
amazing.
some episodes too.
My kid literally, when she was about 2 or 3, would watch nothing else. So I've seen every episode several times.
Okay.
The entire,
That's a good one.
Yeah, the entire series. But essentially, there's an episode where they again travel, into the future, and then reach the end of time.
Okay.
And it's like the Big Bang. It's secular. So the Big Bang creates another, future.
Okay.
And then it just goes. It's just a cycle.
Just infinitely
cycling. Yeah, the Big Bang.
Yeah, it's a fascinating.
It's the start
idea.
of the new universe and the end of the old one.
Yeah, that might be what's actually.
I don't know. Maybe we just keep expanding until we, I don't know, like on the surface of drop of water, just expand and then like reach the other side and then boom and then kind of start all.
Keeps just cascade. Yeah, that's. I think there are some theories on that. can't remember what they're called, but the entropy one. That's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that has to do with the expanding universe. I think that the universe is entropy is kind of a measure of like orderliness, like disorder or amongst a system. Mm. Like it comes up a lot in like like heat or statistical mechanics, where you have a bunch of particles vibrating. There's an entropy. So like the universe, has to do. He said something pretty accurate. Like essentially, you're going to have the state of the entropy of the universe is changing, is expanding. So you are having things kind of getting further and further apart. I think this ends in one of the theoretical results called the big freeze, to where just everything, like matter is no longer together, everything is pulled apart, and everything is just kind of radiation. You're left with just radiation. And I believe it's like the entropy of the universe is increasing as it ages. Okay. Meaning that the system, I believe that's correct if I don't have it backwards, meaning that the system is becoming more disorderly. And I believe that's if you think of the system in an orderly state as being like these bound state particles and the way that life is organized just on like a particle scale. You're thinking of that as in the particle scale. And that is being changed continually as the universe expands. The Hawking radiation part, I don't have a lot of expertise in that. There's certain things I can probably tie to that. This has to do. One big thing I do know about Hawking radiation and black holes is that it does have future insights, and it's a big area of study for unifying gravity with the other forces. And that's where a lot of that field is going as well. So That's great that he reminded me of that. That's another area that's being heavily explored. The Hawking radiation is kind of like information cannot be destroyed, so it's all thought of quantum mechanically. So like when things are crossing the event horizon of the black hole, they are then out of what is our causal contact, meaning like you are no longer seeing that light anymore. If it's now eaten by the black hole. And the Hawking radiation has to do with, I forget the details, so I'm not going to go too far with this, but it has to do with an effect of that occurring and the conservation of the information being consumed by the black hole. Okay. There's some pretty that one gets pretty far out there with it ties into unification that we talked about earlier as well. Mm-hmm. What did he specifically ask about the Hawking radiation? If you don't mind reminding me, I think I may have
just said and Hawking radiation. That's literally all I said about that. So about space between particles, and Hawking radiation.
Yeah, the entropy part, they're separating with the expansion. Yeah, mm-hmm. Eventually, supposedly, if they continue, will end up just radiation. So,
when you mentioned black holes and the conservation of the energy being consumed, I guess the light energy, but does that mean like it's being stored somewhere?
That's that's an amazing question. I don't know. I'm also trying to gather the bits and pieces I do know about that area. Let's see.
I mean, it's okay to just theorize and just think, whatever you might think about
right.
it.
Okay, yeah. Oh, true. I think I might be being too pedantic about the way I'm approaching this.
You can't help it, though. It's the way your mind thinks.
Well, no, I don't know. Got me talking about physics, and I'm going to run. So
yeah,
that's why I was like, hey, please stop me if I get to a certain point, because like I don't have this calibrated very well.
Right.
Yeah, so that is, there's something called the holographic principle, I believe, that's tied in with, and the insights about the gravity is what I'm trying to recall right now. Mm-hmm. But it does have to do with information theory. So the Hawking radiation, let's see, ChatGPT will know. Let's see.
Right.
Yeah, there's something I'm missing that's pretty fundamental that would tie this together. But let's see what ChatGPT has to say.
What question do you want to ask?
Yeah. Oh, apologies.
No, go ahead.
Explain Hawking radiation to me, maybe. Okay. Probably to spit something out pretty decent in lay terms.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I was asking about the whole information being stored in the black hole, a lot of things that I guess I have a strong interest in movies and music, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so I try to relate a lot of things to that. I don't know. I spend a lot of time watching and listening to both.
Nice.
Probably more than I should, right? But either way, the movie Interstellar comes to mind, right? With the whole black hole thing and information being stored in there, because that was like the missing piece. Like when Matthew McConaughey's character enters the black hole, he's able to transmit that missing part of the equation to his daughter.
That's right.
What was her name? Murphy.
Murphy.
Her daughter Murphy.
Right.
Yeah, daughter Murphy. And he was able to do that throughout time,
That's right.
And was able to explain it to her, the missing parts of the equation that they needed to have so that they could transport everyone out of
In the first place, right?
Yeah, to get everyone off of the dying planet. Earth was dying, basically.
Right.
And so there was this big equation that they were trying to figure out, so they could basically build like a Noah's Ark, but they couldn't quite figure out. I guess because this thing would be so massive, like how are they going to get it off the Earth? I don't know. I couldn't.
Right.
That part I kind of got lost. But regardless, the movie showed Matthew McConaughey going into the black hole. Therein lied the answer in some weird way. I think there was some 4-dimensional beings or 5-dimensional beings residing inside this black hole that was able to transfer the information to him, and then
he was plucking some strings.
And then he was able to do it through Morse code and on a watch and some weird stuff. It was crazy, but it was just cool. Obviously, this is where obviously the artisticness of the movie's writers and directors and everybody got into play. But it was a beautiful thing. Right?
No, it was an amazing movie. Yeah. You just reminded me of something, so thank you. I believe that has to do with entanglement. Yeah, so the Hawking radiation and how we transmitted that data, I believe, has to do with entanglement, which was the last Nobel Prize, last year.
Really?
Yeah, verifying. Quantum entanglement, where two particles are entangled, their information, their states are within the wave function that describes their states, essentially, they have, that are connected with each other. And so, say the spin, it's actually, I think, a big part of quantum computing too. So the entanglement is, I believe, ChatGPT may verify or falsify this, but I believe that is connected to the Hawking radiation through the entanglement of particles that were lost over the event horizon. And I actually kind of want to verify that a little bit.
So it spit out the thing about what Hawking radiation is, and it mostly talks about what black holes are. You said
interesting.
Yeah, black holes, according to Hawking, black holes aren't completely black. Instead, they emit a type of radiation called Hawking radiation. This radiation is created when a pair of virtual particles, which are particles that appear and disappear very quickly, are created at the edge of the black hole. Normally, these particles would quickly cancel each other out and disappear, but when they appear on the edge of a black hole, one particle can be pulled into the black hole while the other escapes. Mm-hmm. The escaping particle is what we call Hawking radiation. Over time, this radiation causes the black hole to lose energy and shrink in size. Eventually, the black hole will disappear, will completely evaporate and disappear. To summarize, Hawking radiation is a type of radiation emitted by black holes that causes them to lose energy and quickly or eventually evaporate. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So when Mikey J was talking about Hawking radiation earlier, was he basically talking about a universe that's just filled with just black holes?
I don't know.
Or part of the universe as it expands, it's just nothing but black holes out there?
I don't know, because black holes apparently evaporate eventually.
Well, and that's just it. I guess that explains that it would.
Yeah, the particles just kind of dissipate, I guess.
Because that's supposed to be what happens when a star explodes, right? At the very end of it's this black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the stars exploding got all these black holes at various points in the universe. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. Because that's exactly right. The ones that are big enough to end up in black holes after they supernova, right? Yeah. Right. So to tie that in with his question, that I have no clue.
Yeah.
But that's actually an interesting idea. You just have a space filled with these massive black holes everywhere.
Okay, so how are Hawking radiation and quantum entanglement related? Hawking radiation and quantum entanglement are related because both phenomena involve the behavior of subatomic particles and the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. Let's see.
Yeah, that may not be directly what I was thinking.
Yeah. It's a longer one.
Yeah, black hole information theory is not my. I mean, it's like the little bits and pieces and some general things, but to like really go into Hawking radiation is an interesting field. It is tied to the unified stuff and the quantum gravity in a sense, though, for to study, which is a pretty interesting area.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, ChatGPT is leading the way in this podcast. It's sponsored by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Talk about trades.
Yeah, that thing is just getting started too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gonna be pretty incredible because like with the version 4 they just came out with, it now handles video and audio too.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah,
I did hear about them updating the version. I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's
that's what it was.
It's way more. Yeah, it's completely crazy. Then they have 5 already on the horizon. Like they're just.
Oh, I bet.
It's, I don't know what the difference with that'll be, but it's like your runaway scenarios you guys were talking about earlier. Well, this thing's got a hold of it, and I think partly. So I have no idea. We'll have to buckle up.
Was that March 14th version? Because it doesn't say 5 or whatever. It's just
14.
4.
Yeah, that was when it was launched, I believe.
It's free research preview, so I can, I guess, preview it.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet, so it'd be interesting to see.
GPT-4. Yeah.
But before it kills you, you'll have to subscribe for $19.99 a month.
Right.
Along with your Twitter $8 badge.
Yeah.
Gotta agree to the terms.
Because that's Elon's company too.
Is
OpenAI.
it?
Yeah. Well, he started it.
ChatGPT is?
Yeah, OpenAI is.
OpenAI.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is what he was making ChatGPT. So yeah, he's taking over the world.
Man, I thought that I had seen some news exclusive. Okay, no. Okay, he may have started, but the new CEO was like some.
There we go.
Yeah, he's like, I forget what that.
I can't remember.
I forget his name either, but he's like 37 years old and he's probably a billionaire. So, or at least a millionaire.
Oh, he's sort of the front. He's sort of the face of it right now. Right?
Yeah, he's the face.
I can't remember his name,
now.
but yeah, I know. Okay, that's right.
For OpenAI, I forget his name.
That's right.
Too. Good, just a quick Google search, I'm sure, but
yeah, that's a hell of a company to be the face of.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say he's probably gonna be under the thumb of everyone right now. You know what I'm saying? Or I say under the thumb, but just at least under the microscope. Kind of like look at what Mark Zuckerberg, all the heat he came under just with Facebook.
Oh my God, yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think this guy's gonna be? What might be under?
Probably more.
I would think so too.
It's hard to tell like where this thing's gonna take us.
So well, yeah. So here's the thing: like we just asked it some serious questions, right?
Right.
But what if we were to ask it something else, man? I mean, and who's to say what it spits out? Is that factual? Is it real? Is it fake news?
It's like Google.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like, is it crafted? Are these answers cultivated at all?
Oh, the bias, like the bias.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think. I mean, that's. I don't know if I saw somebody had like dug into that, and I don't know how they checked it, but they did claim that it has.
There was some bias.
Now I don't know if it was built in or just like a random product of what it's. Yeah, I don't know, but
comes up on its own.
Yeah,
which is pretty intense to think that machine learning would learn. Bias.
Well, all of these responses,
it's doing it on its own. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Are verified or rated, I think, by people, right? And people have biases. So people are like, this information is more correct than this one. Then I'm gonna, rate this one higher.
Yep,
and then it's by natural bias, it's gonna be. It could be biased, based on who's giving these ratings.
Sure. Naturally.
Yeah. That's. I don't know how that's gonna be managed, or I'm sure whether it's natural or someone is implementing it like some point. 'Cause it's like with the social media stuff, especially the political.
Oh yeah.
Like that was intentionally engineered in a sense, like the algorithms being biased. So so it's like I'm sure it's like what's going to stop this from kind of
from that
similar.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's what people want to know too. If this technology gets in the wrong hands, what happens?
That's the fear. Yeah.
So
or actually its own hands, and then completely out of our like control.
Sure.
Like this thing's just a runaway. So I don't know what's worse, in the hands of evil humans or in its own hands in an unknown runaway. Like then it's literally Skynet is happening.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think we could stop that either. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like, what are we gonna do to stop it?
Can't, man. We've opened the Pandora's box.
Yeah.
So now it's just
a matter of time, I guess.
No, just gonna see where it takes us.
Yeah.
Popcorn popped and
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I would say just remember your fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
Remember your basics,
yeah.
which is be like, I don't sound like a hippie, but love,
Yeah. Peace and love.
No, that's powerful.
positivity. You know,
Absolutely.
try to conjure some meaning in our short life. You
Yeah.
know, and be happy with it,
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
that means.
Teach your children, you know, pass down love to
That's
teach
true,
them,
too.
Absolutely.
raise them right, and hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully they'll stick around throughout all the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll make it, because we'll probably be gone before it gets too crazy.
Possible. We'll see.
Yeah.
We're gonna see some crazy stuff. I don't know. 38.
Yeah.
I'll be 36 this year. You'll be 36 this year.
Yeah, a
So
little
we're about
ways.
we're about the same age. So
Yeah.
you know, we can expect to live another 40 plus years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll see
Hopefully.
some crazy shit.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I mean, we'll double our age for sure. You know what I mean? Hopefully.
Right.
And
Hopefully.
then,
Yeah,
you
God
know,
willing.
I mean, we'll see what happens in the next 38 years or so. You know,
Yeah.
it's gonna be crazy.
Be interesting
Yeah.
to say the least. Well, do you want to wrap it up here, man?
Yeah, man. Unless
Call
you
it
got
good.
anything else, you got.
I not unless you guys have any
Well, we reached.
anything else you want me to kind of elaborate on, or I don't.
We reached a point in your academic career, but
That's right. Yeah.
did we ever, like talk about what you're doing right now?
Oh, right now is purely. I mean, I'm kind of a transition in sense to where taking what I've done and applying it in a practical sense.
Okay.
In a career, which is it's an interesting journey, because of the the music stuff that I did in a previous life, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, extremely impressive. Don't let this guy downplay
Oh,
his musical
Very humble.
knowledge and the equipment and everything. It's quite
I
impressive.
appreciate that. It was a life, 15 years of collecting piece by piece.
Yeah.
And
Building his
it's-
own, extremely impressive, hardware and outboard gear,
the DIY.
wiring, everything.
That's fun.
The whole studio, basically.
Well, if there's any fans of Elysian, they'll definitely be able to hear what that sounds like, because we're gonna be
I'm looking
using
forward to it.
we're gonna be using his studio to record this next album coming up.
Yeah,
Nice.
hopefully very soon, the next coming months. I know we did Priest of Hiroshima.
Yep.
Shout out to
That was
Priest of
fun.
Hiroshima.
Oh, y'all did that at,
Yeah,
at,
did
at
that
the
at his
studio?
studio.
Oh,
That was a lot of
nice.
fun.
So if y'all want to hear
Nice.
some of that, go to their sure YouTube, Facebook, all that stuff is on there.
Oh yeah, priests are good.
Do you have any other works like posted anywhere, like
Not
a
right now.
website or anything? You said you took it down.
Well-
You're rebranding, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some in that kind of weird, like quite literally life transitional phase, like
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
of rearranging some things, and that was a part of that was not having like the website that I had up. That's kind of in limbo,
Okay.
and I don't have a lot of pointers. I mean, if there's some projects out there, but not on my website. Priest of Hiroshima being one of them for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody wants to listen to that, it was a lot of fun to work on. So to answer that, no, I don't have things out there right now because of the career change and the transition, and actually still trying to figure out what I'm doing with that. So like with you bringing me a project, which I'm looking forward to greatly and can't wait for, it's like I'm taking projects selectively like that, but I'm not running anything full time.
Got it.
On the horizon, I'm not sure what that looks like. I could be doing that at some point, or maybe having someone else help me with the studio while I'm doing other things. So these are like pieces that are not put together right now,
Right.
in a sense. And there's some priorities that need to be kind of put in order correctly. However, I love the studio and that kind of work and music and art and all those things way too much to just like
Let it go.
I have such a difficult time with that, that I've got to find some way to keep it,
Right.
So but that's about where the studio stands. And I would say in the next year or so, I think I'll have a more stable, like a more clear answer of where that is, as far as like me running it, or
Mhm.
or if I'm doing full-time production, or if someone else is doing full-time production. I'm just kind of managing it in a way, you know.
Right.
So there's a lot of those kind of cards on the table,
Right.
that are kind of like unforeseen at the moment. So
How about for the physics world?
yeah, where I'm at with that is it got to a point. So it's a question of being practical or no,
Right.
with my life, my priorities. So as far as what I did with research, I fell in love with, and it was fascinating to study. And, you know, what I chose is very narrow and hard to apply to a career that I would, how do I say this?
Find meaningful, maybe?
No, not meaningful. It's more so you have the financial piece of the puzzle coming in.
Oh.
And then to continue doing that would require getting a PhD, going through that whole process, and then maybe ending up somewhere in research.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, usually people in research don't do it to get rich. They do it because they love what they're researching. Sure. They're passionate. And so that wouldn't be the goal. However, where I'm at right now, I am looking for applying what I just did to, you know, working for a company doing, maybe, I don't know, some sort of engineering or something where it's applicable. Mm-hmm. And that's because I'm having a hard time justifying a PhD, especially at this stage. It's like I can go do that, but I'm having a hard time with taking more time out, and then it's like an opportunity cost kind of thing, like weighing the opportunity costs of where are things at. So yeah, it's like puzzle pieces, but there's a priority of, you know, we got to get some finances together. We have to sort of justify what you just did for the last 7 years in a way that makes sense,
in a financial sense.
In a financial sense. And so kind of segueing. So the transition of going from one point in my life to another has been incredibly interesting. And so now it's just a game of balancing sort of the things that I've done previously and going, okay, what in the hell do I do with all of this now?
Right.
You know?
Right. You told us earlier before the podcast that you were kind of applying that to an oil and gas company at one point, or a startup, right?
Yeah. It was a few months ago. So I believe, last year, it was my first opportunity outside of graduating, and it was for a startup, and it was a really amazing opportunity. They were a company that did leak detection for pipelines. Mm-hmm. So it could be water, gas, like any liquid. I don't think they did natural gases or anything, at least not yet, but mainly like liquid pipelines. And they devised this sensor that is free floating, that goes down.
How big was
the pipelines? Just pretty small.
And just one sensor? Was it multiple or just one?
It was one contraption with the multiple sensors, but there's things I don't know to talk about because it was all proprietary. But But no, there's but as far as just what it did, it picked up like just information based on it traveling down the pipeline, like acoustics and magnetics and just all kinds of things you can analyze and then correlate back to the pipeline and the fluids, you know, just taking into account all of these variables and then doing anomaly detection and then reporting back to the pipeline owners that this is what we detected, this is where you have problems, the nature of them, et cetera. So, you know, they've been doing pipeline leak detection and those sorts of things for a long time. It's not new,
right?
But they have a different approach to it with the way their sensors built, which is really innovative.
Your expertise, where you come from in that realm of physics, was going to be able to help them with that technology?
It was actually a really unique thing to where it was where my music background and physics background merged, because they had me analyzing the acoustic signals.
Oh, wow.
And it was like a really interesting, because when I'd seen the opportunity, I was like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like to find something like that. So that's perfect. Kind of where I'm looking is like DSP, in the sense of like the mixed signal technologies, like even designing like converters, things like that are very interesting to me.
That'd be awesome.
It's where now it's like, where can I just invested so much time, probably at various times in an impractical sense. I put so much time into these things. Where can I merge them in this really interesting way, you know? And it's things like that, like acoustic analysis, or I mean, there's a lot of examples, but I'm looking for something kind of narrow, like where those two come together. Yeah. And it turns out to be a lot of different areas, actually.
That's good.
But it's it's kind of a puzzle for me right now to piece that together correctly, but kind of a fun puzzle.
You hear that, podcast world? Matt Teel is looking for an opportunity to merge physics and acoustics. So anybody out there?
He wants to analyze your acoustics physically.
Yeah, well, an acoustician, might make sense,
Analyze your physics acoustically.
Ooh.
Wait a second. It's processing in an interesting way.
Yeah.
I have to let that marinate.
Right.
That's interesting.
But yeah, so if you got any websites or anything, any links you want to share, your LinkedIn or anything like that, let me know. I'll put them on in the description and everything. So if anyone wants to contact you, they can.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, especially if they get a hold of this episode or whatever. Yeah, you have put all that in the description.
Yeah,
you have all your information. But this has definitely been an awesome conversation. Yes. Hopefully this isn't the last one. I'd love to have you back on, even for like a part 2 of whatever.
Yeah,
sure. If willing, absolutely, I would love to. I really enjoyed you guys having me on and letting me kind of randomly and incoherently at times ramble about physics. Yeah. There's a lot there to unpack, and I was thinking about it on the way here. I was like, if we're going to talk about physics, how am I going to unpack some of these things, and should I?
Yeah.
And when I do, how am I going to warn them that I'm going to need some, I'm going to need, maybe sometimes be tapped on the shoulder like, hey, dude. So I appreciate you letting me do that. And next time, if you would have me on, I would love it. I would maybe try to have it together in a sense that is a bit more organized and not me like just running on with it, because that's what I do with this stuff, and I'm working on that. So I apologize if I was running on with some certain
things. You're good, man. Okay. Honestly, the next time to have you on, it would be great to talk about, like, especially when you're done with this transitional period, where you are then, and how that journey worked out for you and everything else. So it'd be good to have an update on that.
Yeah, Mikey J says definitely bring him back.
Yeah, there it is.
He loved the talk.
Nice.
Yeah.
If he's interested in Hawking radiation and entropy, like he's looking at some stuff out there. He's got his.
He's an electrician.
Yeah.
So he knows the electrical side of things, electromagnetism. I'm sure.
Cool. Yeah.
He's got some knowledge in that, apparently. And then he just has been chiming in every now and then. So thanks for sticking with us through this 3-hour-long session, Mikey J. Appreciate you, bro.
Heck yeah.
Was it really 3 hours?
Yeah.
Wow.
Didn't seem like it, huh?
No.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have Mikey J on one of these times too.
Sure.
And chat about stuff.
Yeah, no, the talk of all trades, that's what it's about.
Right.
What's so cool is that, we go back to Sanjak days, right? You said you were in your 21?
Yeah, about that.
About that. I know I was like 19, 20, something like that too. So we've got this group of friends and this group of people that we've met in early stages in life, and they've all gone on to do really amazing things.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's awesome to see, and we like to have these guys on, and talk about what it is that they know and love. And again, appreciate you coming on here and schooling us on some physics.
Oh yeah. I love me some physics.
To do it. Appreciate it again.
So hopefully soon enough we'll go dust off some transistors and
let's do it.
Pump some audio.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Yeah, that'll be good.
It's gonna be nice.
Blow some capacitors up.
Yes.
Sweet. All right.
Well, that's
All right,
it,
guys. Well, thank you again.
Thanks again.
All
right,
sir.
That's a wrap.
Oh man.